Good evening. Welcome to the Transportation Commission meeting for June 27, 2024. My name is Inumi Duno Bikoya, and I am the Transportation Commission Staff Liaison. This meeting is being recorded, so please turn off your mics when you are not speaking. Before we start with the agenda items, are there any citizen comments on matters not on the agenda? Okay, with that, hearing none, I will turn the first item in the meeting over to Chairman Chris Lapp.
Thank you, Ms. Obakoya. I have nothing specific before the meeting gets going, so we can go right on to the first real agenda item.
Okay, we have the Barcroft Master Financing and Development Plan and the associated policy document updates.
Hi, good evening. All right, I think the presentation is loaded and visible up on the screen. My name is Olivia Sontag with the Arlington County Planning Division, and I'm joined this evening by my colleague, Kristen Calkins and Matt Matuzik to provide this presentation. Mid-presentation, we'll also hear from the applicant team just to walk us through some of their exhibits that are within the MFDP that they're proposing. And then we also have several other staff members online to assist with questions later in the presentation. So we'll start out with some background. We also want to give you just some background about the working group process that's occurred over the last 6 months, the MFDP land use elements. Then again, the Jared Lynch team will share some updates on their redevelopment plan proposal. And then we'll finish up with some of our policy recommendations and the remaining schedule for this land use analysis process. So to begin with some orientation to the site, the map on the right-hand side shows Columbia Pike on the very top of the screen, and Barcroft is bounded generally by South George Mason Drive to the east, and then South 4 Mile Run Drive Minor to the west. And then it does include this kind of triangular tail portion that's just south of South George Mason Drive, as well as the Penske truck rental site up in the northwest or northeast corner, and then the kind of commercial Goodwill property up on the northwest corner. So it's about a 60-acre property. It was built in 2 different phases, totaling 8 different sections, and contains a total of 1,335 housing units, mostly 1 and 2 bedroom. So in 2021, Barcroft Apartments, the property was listed for sale and it risked the displacement of many residents. So with a loan from Arlington County and Amazon to Jared Lynch, they were able to acquire the property, and the affordability of those 1,335 units was preserved for 99 years, up to 60% AMI. So no residents were displaced as a result of this acquisition. Additionally, rents were frozen in 2022 for residents living at the property, and annual increases, which started in 2023, are capped at 3%, up to a maximum of 60% AMI. And then also as of December of 2023, Jared Lynch and the county have agreed to meet some deeper affordability needs by committing to deliver at least 10% of those units as affordable to households earning up to 30% AMI. So we had 2 primary objectives for this land use process following the December 2023 approval of the financing plan. And the first was to build upon and update the vision of the neighborhoods area plan from 2012, as well as the Columbia Pike Revitalization Plan, which was adopted in 2005. And the goal of this is to support both the financing plan, but also incorporate some additional site analysis and information that's been provided by Jared Lynch over the past couple years. And then a second objective of this process was to explore some existing and new tools to ensure the updated vision and commitments are clearly documented and can be successfully implemented as part of a phased strategy for this large site. So moving on to the working group process, the land use analysis process also included forming a working group to assist the county in reviewing the Jared Lynch plan, involve key stakeholders, identify and resolve any community and resident concerns, and then for working group members to act as liaisons for their respective groups. So these members represented 25 different civic associations, commissions, and committees, including the Transportation Commission, and then a handful of community organizations, as well as staff support from multiple departments throughout this process. And this just gives you kind of an idea of some of the working group meetings that were held throughout the process. There were 6 working group meetings held in total, and then 4 primary meetings that focused on different topic areas. And these included the conservation area limits and redevelopment areas. At the second meeting, we covered the transportation network and parking, and then public open space and natural areas, and then finally urban design and transitions between those preservation and redevelopment areas. And throughout that whole process, we also held several engagement opportunities through some online feedback forms and pop-up events on site, as well as an open house that was held at the Barcroft leasing office for both residents and the broader community. Following the final working group meeting, we identified 3 actions for county board consideration in July, which we're in the process of bringing to a number of different county commissions. So the first is to adopt those 2024 updates to the neighborhoods area plan and the revitalization plan. The second is to authorize advertisement of amendments to the GLEP and the MTP for final consideration by the board, likely in January of 2025. And then the third item is for the board to approve Jar Lynch's master financing and development plan as is required by the loan documents. So moving on to the MFDP. So this is the document that's produced by Jar Lynch. It reflects their vision and commitments for the site, including the affordable housing financing plan, the site redevelopment plan, and a phasing plan. Earlier versions of this were submitted to the county manager in 2022. And in December of 2023, the board approved the financing plan portion of the MFDP. But this 2024 land use process has informed the redevelopment and phasing plan. And this is the first time the board will consider the MFDP as a whole. And again, this board approval is required as part of the loan agreement terms. So amendments to the Columbia Pike form-based codes in the second half of the year will implement much of the vision established in the MFDP, but staff is also exploring other phase development tools that might be introduced in the second half of the year to help document and track some of these commitments. So the commitments in the MFDP generally follow all of those same topics of discussion covered with the working group, again, including the conservation area limits and redevelopment areas, the transportation network and parking, the open spaces, and then urban design and transitions. And then during the working group process, we also worked with members to establish principles for each of those 4 topics that we covered. I won't read through all of these, but you'll notice that we do have a principle established for the multimodal transportation network and parking. And we can come back to this slide later if that's helpful. So this is another quick visual of how the MFDP fits within some of the other actions we'll be bringing to the board in July. So along again with that MFDP, we will have the requests to amend both the neighborhoods area plan and the Columbia Pike revitalization plan, as well as those amendments to the GLEP and the MTP, which we'll cover in just a few slides. So in the background, we've also been reviewing those renovation use permits throughout the site, and the Jar Lynch team will talk to you a little bit about where those approvals have occurred to date. And then coming up in the second half of the year, we do anticipate starting to review at least one new development use permit for the affordable housing on the site. And this just gives you another snapshot of the kind of table of contents in a sense of the site redevelopment plan within the MFDP. So again, covering each of those 4 topic areas. Of particular interest to the Transportation Commission is going to be the vehicular circulation. So they talk about the enhanced primary connectors along 12th Road South in particular, preservation of existing routes, but also some additional connection points throughout the site. And then as well as bike circulation, integration with existing bike infrastructure, but also the exploration of further connection opportunities and improvements to some of those existing routes. And then the MFDP also covers some of the pedestrian circulations and opportunities for enhancement and safety improvements there, as well as the parking vision for both the preserved units as well as the redeveloped areas. So with that, I'm going to invite, I believe, Lauren Riley to cover the Jar Lynch site redevelopment plan slides.
Thank you, Ms. Sontag. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Lauren Riley. I'm with Walsh Coaching. We represent Gyre Lynch Real Estate Partners. Joining me tonight is Mr. Mike Pinkoski with FICA, our transportation engineer. And then joining us virtually as well are David Hildy and Greg Ward from Gyre Lynch. And so Ms. Sontag did a great job of giving the background of kind of where we started with that historic acquisition of Barcroft Apartments and what we've been up to since that time. And one thing that we've been doing over this past year or so has been pursuing these renovation use permits. So while this master finance and development process was underway, Gyre Lynch really wanted to get started on improving some of the existing buildings and conditions for their residents. And get a jump start on that and not have to wait till the end of this process. And so since July of last year, we've been able to process 4 use permits that preserve approximately 15 buildings and upwards of 350 units within Barcroft. And you can see the boundaries of those individual use permits in the image there to your right. And these, with these use permits, not only will the buildings and units be preserved from a historic perspective, but as well as from an affordability perspective. And then some items that you'll see there in that bullet list of improvements include interior renovations like in-unit washers and dryers, something we know residents have said they were really excited about, upgraded fixtures and renovated kitchens, bathrooms, upgraded mechanical systems as well, getting rid of some of those older boiler systems and providing more modern heating and air equipment. We've also, where possible, converted units to type A accessible units and provided the associated ADA parking with that. And so we've been happy with the results of those renovation use permits, and we'll continue on with the remainder. But then in turning to the working group process that we've been on over the past several months, Ms. Sontag gave a good outline of those various meetings that we've had starting at the beginning of this year. And I will say our team has been quite pleased with that process. We've really enjoyed the dialogue and the feedback that we've gotten, and we feel that we've been responsive to the working group's concerns and feedbacks, and that this plan reflects that vision. And so I'll just go through relatively quickly some of the key elements of the redevelopment plan. And so on this slide is really meant to show you what's informing our the location of the redevelopment sites. So one main consideration is of course topography. If you have all been out to Barcroft, you'll note it's quite steep and hilly in some areas, especially on the southern end. That's a factor in determining where to locate redevelopment. But the chief influence here is the neighborhood's form-based code conservation area. That area in that highlighted green color in the center there is the area that's intended for buildings to be preserved historically, as well as from an housing affordability perspective. We've made a couple of changes to the existing form-based code recommendations. Those purple hatched areas to the left of South Thomas Street are areas where we're adding back in buildings that we think should be preserved to keep that historic Barcroft gateway intact. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see the black hatched areas where we're proposing to remove some buildings from the conservation area to accommodate crucial transportation elements like that South Taylor intersection down from Columbia Pike. And then we'll also be introducing a new amenity center building, which is in that blue hatched area along South Thomas Street that'll be available to Barcroft residents. And then on the right, you can see the resulting areas of new development that we'll be proposing. You have the next slide. And then here I'll hand it off to Mr. Pinkoski to walk you through some of the key elements of our transportation plan.
Yeah, hello everyone. So what we're looking at here is the proposed road grid as well as the proposed bike circulation. On the left, what we're really have been focused on is enhancing the connections internal to Barcroft and from the existing network outside of it. The current MTP calls for numerous roads that are closely spaced and somewhat redundant. And some of them run through the proposed conservation area. So what we're really been focused on is an enhanced 12th road that provides an east-west connection from George Mason all the way to South Wakefield Street. And that also, as Lauren mentioned, a new connection of South Taylor Street from Columbia Pike down to 12th Street. The purple roads indicate existing travel ways through Barcroft that are really parking lots supporting all the existing residential buildings. On the right-hand side is the proposed bike circulation network. Around the boundaries and off-site, those are facilities that are currently planned within the MTP. Internal to Barcroft, the MTP calls for 12th Road to be a bikeway, but we are going to be enhancing that through this process. West of Thomas Street, there is a trail connection proposed on a future road. What we've been able to do is work with staff, and we're really trying to create that east-west connection similar to the road grid. So we will be providing enhanced facilities along 12th Street, and as well as along Wakefield, and providing from Wakefield to the WNOD trail a connection along 4 Mile Run Minor, which was not currently contemplated in the NTP. Go to the next slide. So this on the left-hand side is the existing parking areas highlighted in the pink reddish color. As I mentioned, are all the internal road network that is effectively parking lots for all the residents. I will also note that, because of South Thomas Street and how it meanders through the heart of Barcroft, while it's still a public road, that it's mostly used by residents for additional parking. The current parking ratio within Barcroft community is right around a 1.0. And if we look on the right-hand side, we are focused on maintaining that ratio for the conservation area through some redesign of existing parking facilities, and also utilization of future 12th Road and South Thomas Street to provide parking for the conservation area. And then each of the new development would meet the form-based code requirements and park themselves.
Thanks, Mike. Another key element of the proposed redevelopment plan is also pedestrian connections and connections to nature and parks. That's something our design team has put a lot of thought and work into. And so on the left-hand side, you'll see where we're proposing to provide 3 public parks within Barcroft along that main east-west connection to kind of anchor that new 12th Road south and connect and contribute to the stitching that we're doing here between the new development and the existing buildings to remain. And then you'll also see some areas in light green and dark green where we're preserving what's called natural preserve areas and providing additional spaces to plant more trees and contribute to the biodiversity on the site. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see our proposed biophilic path network. This will be pedestrian focused, where these are areas where we're going to enhance existing and proposed connections by providing additional plantings, understory trees, shrubbery, lighting, signage, opportunities for benches and places to pause as you walk up and down throughout Barcroft to really provide a unique connection here for pedestrians and really contribute to the placemaking that we're trying to do here in Barcroft. Next slide. Then here's some illustrative massing renderings. We know it's quite difficult sometimes to imagine what the plan might look like with these 2D exhibits. So this is a very rough estimate, high-level overview of what Barcroft might look like with the proposed vision implemented. And with that, I think I'll hand it back to Mr. Matuzik, and where our team is available for any questions afterward.
Thank you, Lauren. Good evening, everyone. Matt Matuzik with the Planning Division. Just wanted to walk you through several of the policy-related items that we have, and partly explain how the process over the last few months involved a number of very specific plans that have been developed, particularly for the Columbia Pike corridor, including the Barcroft property. But also, since those documents are at least 10 years old, we have revisited a number of plans that have either been established or updated since that time. And as we've gone through this process, the more broader countywide guidance in those other plans has been used to improve and evolve the master financing and development plan that J.R. Lynch has proposed. And as that vision has evolved and gotten support from the community, we are now going back to those 4 key policy documents that you see here in blue and make sure that they are updated accordingly to reflect the same vision because of the level of detail that's embedded in them. So we just wanted to go through a few of these to give you a sense of what that looks like and the level of change that we're discussing in this first half of the year compared to the more detailed analysis that's forthcoming in the fall. So in the next slide, you'll see that as we compare those plans, we also are being very mindful of how does it stack against that adopted vision that we have for Columbia Pike that took us so long to develop. And I think, as you can see here across a number of different metrics, we are exceeding and improving upon that vision as the site is asked to accommodate additional growth to ensure these commitments to affordability can be achieved. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but it's really aimed to kind of summarize the previous slides and how do they compare against what we were expecting to deliver and then what we might see now with this updated vision. On the next slide, here's where we start with those initial planning documents that date back to the early 2000s, the Columbia Pike Initiative Revitalization Plan. This is our first opportunity to plan Columbia Pike and really focus on those commercial nodes or intersections. And you can see here, both the northwest and the northeast corner of the property, George Mason and 4 Mile Run, are impacted by that guidance. So one of the simpler interventions, if you will, to reconcile all of this, we're actually going to take that guidance from that earlier commercial plan and transfer it over to the residential plan that was done 10 years later. And this way, all of Barcroft and its adjacent commercial properties can exist in a singular policy document and not really cause any potential confusion or contradictions when folks need to kind of, switch back and forth between various plans. So as we look at that neighborhoods area plan, this is the one that we did in 2012, focusing on Columbia Pike's residential areas. Here's where we not only bring in those commercial corners, which are shown here in white because they don't have that same guidance in the adopted vision. We will not only complete that entire block, but also return to the previous vision of what type of land use are we expecting, the type of maximum building heights, and then also the other elements that became the building blocks for our form-based code zoning tool, which speak to the transportation network and the open space network. So primarily map changes, but obviously some additional narrative to explain this year's land use process. So just zooming in a little bit further, you can see on the next slide that one of those elements really begins to address. Yeah.
And Matt, I think Kristen's going to jump in here for the next couple of slides, if that's okay.
Sure.
We'll give you a break.
Thank you.
So one of the things that we recognize is that both the neighborhoods plan and then subsequent planning documents in the MTP no longer reflect the vision that we now have for Barcroft. So on these maps, you can see the changes that are really happening with the network. J.R. Lynch didn't really speak to it, but there was a by right development that happened just off of Columbia Pike that makes the 11th Street connection that we had anticipated kind of being that east-west spine for Barcroft no longer implementable. So we've recognized that 12th really does need to do that east-west connectivity. So you can see that highlighted in the blue dash here. We've also recognized that Wakefield needs to have better bike connectivity to connect everyone along from the Columbia Pike corridor parallel to 12th all the way down to 4 Mile Drive 4 Mile Run across South 4 Mile Run Minor. And we want to make sure that those are safe. All of the bike facilities that are identified will be designed based off of the guidance in Appendix C of the bike element so that they provide safe and comfortable facilities for our users. So this is kind of how you can see the network has evolved. If you want to move on to the next few slides, we'll see how that is reflected in the maps. So on this map, you can see that a number of planned connections are no longer going to be part of the vision for Barcroft moving forward. And we're just making sure that the MTP guidance is something that is usable for us moving forward. 12th will become elevated. In the original plan, it was envisioned much more as a bike boulevard. Now we know that it's going to have to accommodate a lot of modes and be a true multimodal street. And where we've lost one South Taylor connection because of the construction of that townhouse development, we've created a new South Taylor connection between 12th and 11th to make sure that we have a little bit more circulation capacity within Barcroft. And then the next slide shows the bike network and how it's evolved. So you can see that there was 12th Road envisioned as a bike boulevard. We know that 12th is going to be doing a lot more now than it had been anticipated when we lose 11th. So we've changed it from an on-street route to a planned bike facility as part of this change. We've also recognized that we really need to catch the grade from South Thomas to South Wakefield, and that the connection that we'd planned before it would be difficult for a lot of users. So we're going to continue the 12th bike facility to South Wakefield, create some sort of safe, comfortable facility on South 4 Mile Run Drive to connect to the WNOD. And that, I believe, ends the transportation slides.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. The other elements that were shown in the earlier slide also capture how some of those layers that were just discussed carry over into our general land use plan. Here's the existing and future street network in the white lines that would need to be updated. Right now, we're looking at the existing GLUP map. In a second, we'll show you what the proposed looks like. But a number of other elements that are reflected here also need to be reconciled. What this map is capturing is really the relationship between those two planning areas, the commercial ones from early 2000s and the neighborhoods one from the 2010s. So the commercial ones are identified by note number 8 on the GLUP, and you can see their dash boundaries there. 24 is the later note that was identified with the neighborhoods area plan and its revitalization district. And 24A is simply an even more finer grained boundary for the conservation area. So the limits of preservation versus redevelopment. While a little bit difficult to read, you can also see 2 small black triangles here. Those are what we typically use for the future public space locations. So we have 2 here that we were tracking through those documents, and all of that needs to be amended to reflect the current MFDP proposal. So in the next slide, you can see how that information has been updated. The boundaries for the note number 8 have been reduced. We now have 3 black triangles because we've gained an extra park at George Mason, and the different line weights have been adjusted to reflect what you're seeing in the other maps, including the MTP. We are also going to use this opportunity to update the GLUP booklet, which is kind of a companion document. We try to update it once or twice a year. And here, I think some additional narrative about this year's process and where we are ending up will be reflected as well to make sure that no matter where you go, you can see this information pretty clearly. All right, and then the next and final section we wanted to cover is really what's still ahead of us, which unfortunately is a lot of work, but it really involves a more detailed dive into the concepts we just finished discussing. So now that we have a general sense of where the parks are going to be and the streets, we now have to figure out their character, their cross sections, the relationship with the buildings, and ultimately get down to the level of detail that already exists in each of the form-based codes. So creating and establishing build-to lines and making sure that we have enough detail available so that when these new construction applications come in, we can review them against this new guidance. So this is something we're going to be anticipating to complete in the fall and come back for further review in the later part of this year and through the winter. And as we do that, at that point, we'll be finalizing the GLUP and MTP changes that we just talked about. They are only being advertised in July. And at that point, we also anticipate probably being ready to consider the first new construction use permit for the property, which would be slightly different from the 4 renovation use permits we've looked at to date. One thing that's not emphasized enough on this slide is another piece of work that will occupy a good chunk of the rest of this year, and that is our ongoing analysis of Doctor's Run. This is the stream that's located along George Mason Drive, but particularly begins to cross through the southern portion of the property. And given how close the surface parking lots are and the existing units to that stream, we really need to do a further examination of the modeling that's used to verify the flood risk and mitigation opportunities, further study the sustainability of that area, and also look at some biophilic opportunities that might exist along the way. So while we've been able to, I think, resolve a lot of vision elements through the first 6 months of the year, we do anticipate that this item will really warrant a separate study that also is going to happen in parallel with the other form-based code updates that we identified earlier. And I believe that is our last slide. You can see our contact there. And for reference, we have prepared specific language in terms of the recommendations. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Obukoya, do we have any speakers on this item?
We do not.
All righty then. Commissioners, if you have questions or comments, go ahead and raise your hand. Let me take a look and see if anybody has hopped virtual. I know we were expecting a couple folks. Yes, Commissioner Lantelme, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, good evening. It's more of a comment. I definitely understand why you have to have some streets removed and some that we had originally wanted to go through don't work anymore. That's just the reality we have to deal with. So I have no concerns about that. 2 things. One, 12th Street looks like we're going to be loading a lot onto that. It'll become a vehicular street. We're going to have, I'm presuming we'll want to have some sort of bike facility that isn't a sharrow, making it a biophilic corridor, which of course implies pedestrians. So it's going to be an interesting design exercise to accommodate all those things successfully. I think we'll want to, at some point, see some ideas on how that cross section is going to look, or how we're going to work this through. But it's definitely, I get why we need to do that. So I'm not questioning it. It's just how is it going to be executed? Second thing, for the new streets that we're creating, some of them, I guess, are really upgrades of what are now parking lots, access miles through parking lots, because I've driven through the site and it's really interesting. It's hard to tell sometimes what the real streets are, what the public streets are and what are within Barcroft apartments. Will the new streets be county owned, or will we have an easement, a county easement for the public to use them? That's my question.
Hi, Kristen, you might be on mute.
I don't think I'm on mute. I was going to address the first comment and say we agree. We know that 12th needs elevated. It's why we've changed it from a boulevard to a bike lane on the map, recognizing that that bike facility will need to be designed based off of the Appendix C guidance and the NACDO guidance on what makes a safe and comfortable facility for users. I am not our expert on the form-based code, and I think I saw Rob pop up and down, but my understanding is that the form-based code has guidance on how streets are delivered as part of development. I don't know if Rob is going to come and assist right here. I think that's all I'm going to say for the lack of my expertise in that area. And I would also say that that's not something that we really focus on at this point in the process. Right now, we're focused on the high level amendments to the plan and the vision, and the detailed question that you asked, honestly, in both parts, are really what we get to in that second phase.
Hey, that's a fair comment. So I guess I throw those out to realize, to ask, that be aware that you will be asked these as we go further through the process.
And Jim, just to clarify the,
It's hard to hear you, Rob.
let's see, any better?
Nope.
Okay, how about that? Okay. Now.
Now you're better.
A little bit better.
Okay. Sorry about that. So the form-based code requires, the neighborhood's form-based code requires that streets be dedicated when they are identified in the code as new streets. And so we're going to be taking a very good look and strong look at which streets have to be, which travelways and streets should be dedicated and turned into public streets. And we would envision that there are going to continue to be private travelways within the Barcroft community to support parking and other things that in ways that we couldn't support them through the regulation of public right of way.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Other commissioner questions? Commissioner Furman.
So I think some of what I was going to ask has been answered, that it's just a little bit too early to ask for specifics on what 12th Street is going to look like at this point, or 12th Road South, I should say. I just wanted to add that the 12th Road South bike lanes, that's an outstanding addition to the community. As the president of the neighboring Columbia Forest Civic Association, I can tell you that'll really create a much more meaningful non-vehicular connection to the W&OD Trail and to the Arlington Mill Community Center. If we don't yet know exactly what these look like, I'll be very interested in hearing a little bit more about what do we expect the bike facilities to look like on that road. Then also the connection point of where it meets South 4 Mile Run Drive, kind of between where South Wakefield Street is before it gets to the W&OD, because that can be a pretty busy street. And so just making sure that those facilities are aligned with managing that. I think also the connection point as of right now is essentially that parking lot that's kind of on the other side of South 4 Mile Run Drive, like the southwest corner across the street from the Goodwill. Just cautioning, that I'd be really curious to see the design for that, because knowing what that space is right now and that it's a parking lot, I'd just be really interested to see what you all come up with for that. And then this next question, it might be most appropriate to Kristen. It's a little bit outside the scope of the site itself, but on slide 27, there was a proposed connection shown between 10th Street South across 4 Mile Run, connecting with what at that time is still the 4 Mile Run Trail, not yet the W&OD. Was curious if that is something that is already in the works or that we're proposing as another part of a different project. You can see it's the leftmost aqua dash line that's on the left map on this slide.
So I can't speak to that connection. Happy to, reach out internally and see if there's any planning happening behind that. But to my knowledge right now, there's nothing in the works. And I will say, to your earlier comment, we agree. And those are all things that we as staff and the applicant know are going to be they're not applicant, it's a very unique situation, J.R. Lynch, are aware of and know that need careful consideration in the second half of the year.
Excellent. And yeah, thank you. If you're able to reach out and provide any feedback on how we can get involved with supporting that connection that's proposed.
Olivia, can you do me a favor and move to the MTP map and see if this is also on that? Okay, it is.
Yeah, I can briefly speak to it in that most of those designations were identified as guidance when future redevelopment would occur. So typically what we would do is wait for that opportunity to engage the owner in the review of their potential redevelopment application, consider exactly what the alignment looks like, the nature and cross section of that connection. So that's more of a expectation that private development would be involved in delivering.
Understood. Thank you so much. And I think I know which apartment building that would involve. So that answered my question. Thank you.
Thanks. I want to say I've been the TC rep for this land use process. It's been a great process. I really commend the Gyre Lynch partners and all the staff. They've been doing a bang up job on what's a really great opportunity and a really fantastic thing that our elected officials have done in saving a dramatic amount of affordable housing in Arlington and Columbia Pike. I'm pretty happy with where we have landed, except for one thing, which my main concern at this point remains 4 Mile Run Drive Minor. One of the big changes, in my opinion, of the Gyre Lynch vision versus what was in the original form-based code vision is there's a fair amount of new development planned for 4 Mile Run Drive Minor, kind of all the way from Thomas all the way up to Columbia Pike, whereas it used to be kind of concentrated there in that top left corner. I like that we have added this little facility of some sort, bike facility of some sort on 4 Mile Run Drive Minor between Wakefield and wherever it can connect to the WNOD. I just feel like we need that facility for possibly the whole length of 4 Mile Run Drive Minor, or at least from Thomas all the way up to the WNOD or to Columbia Pike. Those are pretty sizable buildings that hopefully will hold a whole bunch of new neighbors. And I would really like those new neighbors to be able to get from their building safely to the WNOD. And while the WNOD is right there, it is unfortunately like 10 to 20 feet below where those buildings are going to be. Just the grade there is very steep, and it's hard to connect down there. Ms. Calkins, was there any? Can you talk at all about staff? Whether that we've had conversations about whether more bike facilities would be appropriate on 4 Mile Run Drive Minor to accommodate these buildings and the Barcroft development?
So we have talked and to an extent with Gyre Lynch as well, because everything also comes out of their development site when we're asking for these connections. South 4 Mile Run Minor in front of their property will also be rebuilt. One of the things staff has talked about is that's going to be a wide sidewalk now, that for the, based on the form-based code, when cross sections are created in the next half of the year, that sidewalk will be wide enough for those buildings, the handful of buildings that exist there, that people will be comfortably able to maneuver on those sidewalks if they're uncomfortable on South 4 Mile Run Minor, to make it to the more network-based facilities. We're really trying to focus on making sure that the network is served well. We have a lot of places just in the county in general where you live in a multifamily building or an apartment and you have to get a block or two from where you live to that networked facility. We think the sidewalks can be comfortably designed with enough space that if you're not comfortable on South 4 Mile Run Minor for that couple of block connection, that it can be accommodated on the sidewalk.
Thank you very much. Other commissioner questions, comments? Commissioner Thea?
Yes. So overall, very happy with the Barcroft plan. I mean, it's impressive that Gyre Lynch and the county have come together to preserve as much as this plan puts forward and to help all the residents stay in place. As with the other commissioners, my concerns are with 12th Road South and the bike facility there. I guess I'll have to educate myself on what exactly is meant by 12th Road South needing to be a new form-based code street. And besides that, then what can be done about sort of smoothing out 12th Road South? Going from east to west, it hits, riding a bike, and I'm thinking specifically from a bike user's point of view, you're going from South George Mason Drive, and then you hit South Thomas Street, where there's that little zigzag kink, which is not ideal for cycling. I know that the buildings right around that are marked for preservation. What opportunities could there be to smooth out or realign that intersection, at least for the cycling path?
We've talked about that. There's unfortunately, there's unfortunately just not a lot of opportunity to create a direct connection. One thing that we know is when we get to implementation that we're going to have to do safe intersection treatments along this connection. Those buildings aren't coming down on either side, and it just creates a constraint from an east-west connection point that we can't engineer away. So when we get to the point that we have the connections, if you can see, it's really faint. There is the recognition of a very short jog on South Thomas, even that there's some sort of bike facility. We know that that is going to need very careful consideration and that it needs to be done well.
I guess on a similar note, when 12th Road South gets to South Wakefield Street, with the new construction happening along South 4 Mile Run Drive Minor, would there be an opportunity to smooth out 12th Road South getting to 4 Mile Run, at least for a bike path, instead of hitting South Wakefield and then taking that sharp left and then another sharp right and then a sharp left onto Washington Old Dominion Trail connection?
So again, we're working within the development patterns that are being established to help create the affordable housing on this site. And the new housing, and just from a network perspective, there's not opportunity to substantially change the footprints of these building areas. To create a direct connection would fundamentally change the constructability of the building, I think, at South 4 Mile Run Drive and South Wakefield Street.
And I'll jump in to grade this new grade as it falls from Thomas to Wakefield and South 4 Mile Run is a large factor of why we've had to make those hard decisions on the proposed 12th connection east-west across the site. You know, I don't have the numbers on me, but this is really the best path to negotiate that grade as you go west toward the WNOD trail.
Okay. Still disappointed by that, but one last question on the similar note. On the map, it marks the connection to Washington Old Dominion Trail as in between South Wakefield and Columbia Pike connection, or South Buchanan Street. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there is an unpaved desire path where South Wakefield Street connects with 4 Mile Run Drive Minor. Could that be used at all? Desire path going down, unpaved desire
The
path.
goat path, I know.
Washington Old Dominion.
Yeah, it's been a topic of conversation between staff and Jared Lynch. And from what is reasonably achievable as part of this plan, integrating that isn't. There's a number of stakeholders that would create significant challenges to make that happen. And we also are trying to make sure that we recognize that we're working towards the larger picture of the affordable housing. We're getting the network connectivity that we need and want for the site, but that we're also staying appropriate to what we can achieve through this plan. That's something in the future that if it becomes a strong enough desire, it can be looked into again. But right now, there are two separate entities that would have to come to the table and be part of that conversation that are not part of this MFDP.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess my concerns just all boil down to dissatisfaction with how cycling is treated in the plan so far from, east-west connectivity. It does seem that cyclists, bike users are kind of an afterthought to the plan here. Which doesn't make me happy, especially since, Columbia Pike cannot be used for any type of cycling at all. And 11th Street, because of the new development, the townhouses, that is not able to be used for the cycling facilities. So 12th Road South would have to be it, but yet here it just doesn't seem that it's being treated as a primary mode. Thank you. But all other issues, very happy with. Thank you.
Commissioner Furman.
a follow-up question that's related to Commissioner Theo's comments here. It would seem the current corner of 12th Road South and South Thomas Street, and I have been there, the setback is pretty far from the current building. If my memory serves me right, that building is also not going to remain there. That's going to be the future community center. So I just, almost as a suggestion, I would think there may be a possibility to use some of that green area there to help smooth that connection point to some degree, so that you might be able to avoid putting bikers onto South Thomas Street and instead kind of diverting them off of 12th Road South directly onto the new 12th Road South, because where it looks like the future 12th Road South is, there's that current, it's kind of just an in-between area for a car park right now. But if that's going to be a more major road connection, it's really not a huge distance between where the two 12th Road Souths would be at that division point with South Thomas Street. So just something to consider in the future is that there may be a way to avoid putting cyclists onto South Thomas Street if the setback is going to look anything like it currently does, because it's a huge amount of space currently. Thank you.
Commissioner Lantelmi, do you have another thing, or is your hand just still up from earlier?
Sorry, I just took it down.
No worries. All right, any other comments or questions? All right, so just to be clear on timeline, what's going before the board is in July is what is here before us now, which is the MTP update, the financing and development plan update, and the very broad updates to the neighborhoods plan and the 2005 revitalization plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think
Yes, that's correct.
specifically, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to ask to maybe bring up that last slide with the two primary actions that we wanted to emphasize. There we go.
Great. And then it will be over the second half of the year that we'll get down into the detailed updates to the form-based code.
Yes, second half of the year, we'll be looking at amendments to the form-based codes for those cross sections and other items.
Fantastic. All righty. I look very, as you can tell, the commission is very much looking forward to talking about the cross section for 12th Road South, which I imagine we will be writing into the form-based code. Oh, Commissioner Flores, go ahead.
A point of request as we do that, if we could have maps of topography to gain visual understanding of how the hills affect the roads and transit and how we see it, that would be incredibly helpful. We are all across Arlington, pretty hilly, and this area in particular, I think it would be really helpful to get visualization on those hills as we look at maps like that.
All right, any last minute questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board adopt the resolution attached to our draft staff report to adopt updates to the Columbia Pike Initiative, a revitalization plan, and the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Area Plan, and that they adopt the resolution to authorize advertisement of public hearings by the Planning Commission and the county board for the respective January 2025 meeting dates to consider proposed amendments to the GLUP and booklet and proposed amendments to the MTP, and furthermore, that just that.
Seconded.
All right, that is the county manager's motion. Is there any further discussion of the motion? All right, then we will move to a vote. Let's see. Did Commissioner Coleman end up joining us virtually?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was trying to get on. I got on about half an hour ago.
No worries. It's nothing on you. I just Teams keeps changing their layout, and it gets harder and harder for me to actually see who is here. So moving to a vote, Commissioner Coleman.
Aye.
Commissioner Flores.
Aye.
Commissioner Furman.
Aye.
Commissioner Hussein.
Aye.
Let's see. Did Commissioner Nolan join us virtually? Nope. Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Locker.
Aye.
Great. Commissioner Ludlow.
Aye.
I believe Commissioner Maradovic is in a wholly inappropriate time zone to be here. Commissioner Shannon? Didn't make it. Commissioner Terry?
Aye.
Commissioner Theo?
Aye.
And I too will vote yes, so that motion passes 10-0. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Pentagon Center, the amendment to the Pentagon Center Phase Development Site Plan from 2015 to revise land use mix, project phasing, and the layout, size, and shape of buildings and open space.
Whenever you're ready. Whichever of you is going first.
All right, good evening, everybody. I am Abby Oaklack with Kimco Realty. We are the owner of Pentagon Center, and if you give me a second, I am logged in, however, will not let me share my screen. We have shared the presentation we're going to give and have not changed it. So I don't know if there's a way. Sorry, I just realized it wouldn't let me share. I'm Abby Oaklack. Next one down. Yep, that's me. Awesome. All right. So thank you everybody for having us. We're here to really give you an update on the transportation aspects of the Pentagon Center PDSP amendment. As everybody knows, the original PDSP was kind of finalized in 2010 and updated in 2015. The first two phases of that have been built, which what you see on the map here is A and C in the Whitmer, which is A, and the Milton, which is C, which have opened as of last summer. And so we're here to kind of talk about the improvements that would further update the allowable density on the site, as well as update transportation in and through and around the site that matches the Pentagon City sector plan. From our original approvals and the updates in 2015, that was all pre-Amazon, which you can see in the upper right-hand corner, obviously with the helix in dark gray. And so we're looking to match the density surrounding the site versus what's on the site today and what's currently approved. And so really this is the big overall picture of everything that we're proposing here, with about a 30% increase in open space, and then the increase in density and residential as well on the site is the majority of the increase. The big things that are still kind of staying the same, just so everybody knows, is we still have the street grid through the site and we still have bike connectivity. However, new protected bike lanes are really being added to the center, or to the edge of the center, if you will, really on kind of the main thoroughfares on the edge. So you've got new protected bike lanes on Fern Street on the right, and then new protected bike lanes on 15th to the south. And so those are the kind of thick blue lines, if you will, on your map to your right. Everything else is staying basically the same. However, the locations of the streets have changed in order to accommodate new block footprints, as well as to accommodate the phasing option to leave the Costco in phase one. So the north-south street, which we're calling Grant Street, did move to the west in order to allow Costco to stay in an interim phase one. And so really the overall picture is relatively the same. However, we are adding the sector plan requirements to the right. And again, here's a little bit more detail. We are adding about 1/3 of a mile of new protected bike lanes, and we do anticipate slow traffic on the internal streets for shared connectivity throughout the site. Please note there is limited bike connectivity on 12th Street because 12th Street is the future bus BRT way, and so there is a bus stop in that area, and so there'll probably be limited activity that way. Mike is also on our team, so I'm going to pass to Mike, who is our traffic engineer, to talk a little bit more about additional details that will be changing on the streets, as well as kind of the overall traffic assessment on the site.
Hello again, everyone. So yeah, as Abby mentioned, we're sticking with the same grid that was previously contemplated and enhancing some areas of that and creating these 6 smaller blocks. The focus of 13th will be a retail corridor where there's outdoor dining and pedestrian activity prioritized, especially along the park and west of the park, west of Grant Street. We have some slides later about implementing the green ribbon element along that segment. 14th Street, the southern east-west connection, especially to the west, will really be service-oriented and provide access to the buildings on each of the 4 blocks. Going to the next slide, Grant Street is the main north-south connection that will be provided, and we have some slides coming up that show the sections, but Grant will also be a fire access route for emergency services. I won't get into too much of the details on the sections, just kind of hitting some of the highlights. Again, this will be a new street with outdoor dining opportunities. So the section on the top is what was contemplated in 2015, and 2024 section proposed is on the bottom. So you can see on both sides, we are increasing the building zones from 2 to 20 feet with varying facades to allow for entries and retail activity at the ground floor. Generally speaking, the building facades from face to face and the streetscape with the road will be about 100 feet from building to building. And again, the green ribbon design will be implemented along this stretch of the road. And what will also be an opportunity here is to close portions of it for events and to kind of connect the 2 parks north-south. As I mentioned here, looking at Grant, if you look at the 2, again, 2024 on the bottom, due to fire access requirements, we've increased the street width to the 26 feet required for fire. They probably won't be 13-foot travel lanes each. There'll probably be some kind of buffer created in the middle so that vehicles still maintain that slow move through the 6 blocks here. We're looking to maximize the streetscapes, again, trying to provide that varying facades and introduce ground floor retail opportunities where we can, but we are limited to 30 feet from the face of the travel to the face of the building so that we can meet fire access. 14th Street is partially constructed today with the Milton. It will be improved on the north side within the Milton block and maintain the southern side that has been constructed with the Milton today. That includes the sidewalk with a curbless environment. So as we mentioned earlier, we will be adding enhanced bicycle facilities that kind of match what was done with the sector plan update. Most notably Fern Street. One move that we have made from the previous plan that Abby didn't mention was we've shifted the buildings from facing on Grant Street to the east so that they're on Fern Street to create a double-sided retail street and really bring that open space through the middle of the site. And with that, we've created protected bike lanes from 12th Street down to 15th Street. And where possible, we're actually introducing protected intersection design as well along our frontage. 15th Street along the D block, we will be implementing protected bike lanes there as well. Today, they're just regular on-road facilities with some parking. So here's the section that I just mentioned on Fern Street. Again, 2024 on the bottom, where we are providing that separated facility along our frontage. We were hoping that we could have a larger streetscape and building zone, but unfortunately, due to fire access, we had to really restrict our building zone to allow for the protected bike facility. And also, as I mentioned, we will have the protected intersections where we can implement them. Specifically, one that we've targeted is 15th and South Fern. To start, there are opportunities also to potentially introduce bike lanes with the first phase of a development, which is actually happening on the west side, the opposite side of the Costco. It would come at the expense of either the center turn lane or some on-street parking, but there is an opportunity there. I think I was just talking about this a little bit.
Yeah, and this is the full section in the
Yes.
future. So we could put a northbound bike lane on the other side of the property. It fits within the street section overall if we get rid of the middle turn lane.
Yeah, so you can see on the bottom where we held the curb on the right-hand side, but what it does remove is that center lane and it shifts the parking. Some of the curb extensions on the east side in front of the Met buildings would have to be removed and reconstructed to implement the top plan. And here's just a look of what 15th Street will be in the future, where we have the protected facility and parking will extend the whole block, where today it's only a portion of the block. We did do an MMTA update as well on this. Obviously the site is well served by the metro system. We have the surrounding grid around us. The metro is literally at our front door here. When we looked at the analysis, it was interesting that the Costco development actually generates more traffic than the whole east side of the proposal. So when we remove the Costco, Fern Street the operations of Fern Street would improve with these buildings over having the Costco there. We will be implementing a transportation demand management program with each phase of the development. And then there is a potential that the intersections along South Fern at 13th and 14th could be signalized in the future, pending Warren analysis. This is just a snapshot of what phase one development trips would look like. 52 a.m. peak hour trips, 86 p.m. peak hour trips, 76 a.m. transit users, 346 p.m. transit users, and then some active walk and bike trips of 40 a.m. and 108 p.m. And then here's the numbers that obviously increase with phase two, but you can see the reliance on transit and active trips are significant. This slide again just highlights some of the modal assumptions where we're assuming that about 64% of residents and users of the site will be transit, and another 9% will be active for residential, hotel, office use, slightly less transit, but still significantly high transit users in the area. And then, as I mentioned already, We didn't identify any critical operational issues, and with the removal of Costco, Fern Street actually improves.
And then the last element we really want to talk about is the green ribbon. We briefly mentioned it earlier, but the goal is to have 2 new green ribbon segments through the site, which again, that was something new contemplated for the neighborhood through the Pentagon City Sector Plan that was not contemplated previously through our PDSP plan that preceded it. And so the goal is to have kind of a southwest to northeast, if you will, that basically kind of is a Virginia Highland Park to Penn Place connection. And then additionally, an east-west connection along 13th Street. And so really through the new 4.25 acres of park. And really the design process for all of this is going to be through a public master plan process. But we have kind of anticipated a typical section, if you will, here, and you can see the dots in yellow on the plan on 13th Street. We do believe because of the retail footprint, it is best on the north side of 13th Street, west of Grant Street, and then best on the south side of 13th Street on Grant. So unfortunately, it will have to transition, but we're going to work to make sure that that's a seamless transition when we do the design of that, along with the park master plan. On the left, you'll see the typical section. And again, that comes straight from the Pentagon City Sector Plan for a 16 to 20 foot wide, meeting the minimums and widths. And the goal would be that that kind of undulates and we have some beautiful design and lots of biophilia. So obviously that will come in the next phase, but kind of really giving the framework of that for the future. And that is the remainder of our presentation for today. Thank you very much for your time.
Hello, my name is Joanne Gabor. I am with Arlington County DES, and I'll be doing the staff presentation. This is the 12th Street Landing Phase Development Site Plan Amendment. PDSP, it is SPLA 23-00021. So as we have discussed, this is the location is where the Costco is today. We do have existing buildings in the northwest and southwest corners, and we do have portions of streets completed. Again, that is 14th Street and South Grant Street. And the transitway will be running along 12th Street and Hayes Street. And so those plans for this segment are in the early design phase. We're at about 30% plans. And so that will need to be incorporated as we do look to finish this area to make sure those plans can work in the interim and ultimate condition, in addition with what is proposed in this block. This is an overview of the changes. While the applicant did focus on transportation, suffice it to say there are a lot of changes between use, height increasing, height decreasing, and GFA. The plan is being seen by a planning commission next week. So if you want to learn more about this, please come to planning commission and they will be happy to answer all your questions about density and GFA. But this shows you quickly that we are having about an increase of 30% in GFA across the site. We do have an open space calculation here. We do not have the calculation of what was shown before. So we don't have that comparison here. And there is going to be some internal right-of-way dedication. If that's as I was listening to the discussion about Barcroft, if that is dedicated or private streets with public easements, we'll figure that out during final site plan. But again, there is that open space will now be interior to the site. We do that green ribbon pathway, the entirety of 13th, 14th, and Grant will be completed when this is all finished. And we will have that southbound separated bike facility on South Fern Street. And again, we will be accommodating, coordinating the transportation improvements for the transitway. And any other future improvements that the county goes forward with as this project moves forward as well. So this is the Pentagon Center Guiding Principles from 2008. I have highlighted the ones here that talk about circulation, streetscape, and parking. While you don't need to read these, suffice it to say it talks about we want to have pedestrian friendly, we want to have a grid, we want to have a transportation system that works with the development and it isn't so car-centric. But it becomes more of what do we need to make sure that we can balance the uses for all users, no matter what type of user they are, vehicle, transit, scooter, bike, walk, and try and minimize the parking, of course. While this is not in the Pentagon City sector plan, it is the hole in the donut. We are looking to this for what we want to make sure is compatible with, and we are looking at those guiding principles for the sector plan. Again, we are looking for places for people. We are looking for safe, inviting transportation choices that make driving unnecessary, the biophilia, and make sure it is equitable for everybody who wants to come to this site. This is the proposed phasing. Again, on the left side, maintains the Costco. So we would be seeing completion of a couple more buildings, the completion of Grant Street, and then that segment of 13th Street. And then the second phase, or when Costco is no longer there, we would complete the east side. And there is this building that would come. The one thing that isn't quite so obvious is in the phase 1, we do have this open space in this location adjacent to Hayes between 13th and 14th. And this street right now is proposed. This would need to be, this would be worked out during final site plan design, but then in the future, once these larger green spaces are completed, there would be a building this area. So this green space would go away, and then we would have this larger green space. So one thing we will have to think about as we do the phasing of this, right now we're looking at 2 phases, potentially it could be more phases as the applicant wants to move forward, is make sure that we do have all the circulation, loading, parking, pickup and drop off operations, fire access, and all those movements are accommodated for each phase. So it could turn out to be, you have to build more than just your street frontage to make sure we do that circulation to and through the sites. And the same for that interim park area. We want to make sure that what's designed makes sense if the interim is 6 months, 6 years, or a longer period of time. The street network, again, as the applicant went through, we did some preliminary discussions. All these street sections are going to be looked at closer during final design, and we will get down to the nitty-gritty of what those are. But generally speaking, again, we will be completing Grant Street north-south from 12th to 15th, and then 13th and 14th streets. 13th and 14th will align with 13th and 14th at Fern Street. And then the exact location of 14th exists today, so that's already finished. 13th Street is at Hayes is the one that we will be trying to finalize where that location is during that site plan for that first phase, most likely. The bike network, again, these are from the sector plan. So while this site is not in the sector plan, Fern Street, 15th, Hayes, and 12th Street are within the sector plan. So you do see we do the separated bike facilities on Fern Street, which the applicant is proposing, and also on 15th Street. Again, no bike facilities are proposed on 12th Street because it is the transit way. And Hayes Street, it would be on the west side, so the mall side, so that would not be included with this proposal either. This is a lot of small text that talks about what is in the sector plan. I'm not going to read it all to you, but suffice it to say, this is again what we're looking at. We have guidance about Fern Street and 15th Street. We will be utilizing to make sure that it aligns with sections north, south, east, and west of this site. And it is compatible with Met Park and the future that we are looking for. The green ribbon, again, the green ribbon in the sector plan, as you can see, it is just shown on 14th Street, basically connecting with the existing crossing at Hayes Street and Met Park, as the applicant has shown, and staff generally supportive. It looks like 13th Street makes the most sense. Within this block, the crossing of Hayes Street still will need to be worked out, depending on the timing of redevelopment and where we are with Hayes Street. That will greatly influence what happens. And additionally, you saw with the applicant, they are showing this sort of northeast running, also green ribbon area. I don't think it's intended to be a path specifically, but more of an open space that people will be able to utilize. This is just to remind everybody, this is what we're looking for with the transitway. It doesn't have a lot of impacts in reality to the this site. It is more the site to the north. But we will be utilizing this to make sure that we can realize the interim and the ultimate design. And it will influence what that 12th Street frontage looks like when the Costco portion does redevelop. It will also influence Grant Street and how Grant Street interacts with 12th Street. The public review process, we did 2 LRPC meetings. We were sitting here in July, technically June, but we will be going to the July County Board meeting. And then the developer will be having to submit those final site plans for each phase for public review. And then we will have our traditional SPRC meetings, our staff review, and that's where we will get down to that nitty gritty of what's happening. We are at TC tonight. We are going to PC July 11. Then the county board is July 22. It is a Monday night. If you haven't heard, it has been changed from the traditional Saturday. And with that, staff supports the project and recommends approval with the attached conditions. If you have any questions, I am happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Before we get going super far, can somebody just give one more time a brief overview of what's in phase 1, what's in phase 2, and how long we might be looking at before phase 2 comes around?
Yes, I'm happy to give a little bit background information. Let me share my screen again. And I think the best way to look at it really is this overall plan, just so you can see. I'll go full screen to make it big as possible. So phase 1 really is anticipated to be the west side of Grant Street. So if you think of Grant Street as the north-south divider, the phase 1 is anticipated to be the west side. However, because of all the open space being in phase 2, which would be the east side, which is where Costco is today of Grant Street, we are proposing that this office building not be built until phase 2 and that there is an interim open space in phase 1. So what you'll see is basically kind of the phase 1 line is where my mouse is kind of tracing. It's like basically block B1, B, and A1, and then all of Grant Street north south. Connecting to 12th. However, the office would not be there in the phase 1. Phase 2 would come and build blocks D, E, and F, and the open space, and then the office tower in addition on B1. Once the condition is that once an equivalent open space is open and active in the phase 2 portion, we can start construction on an office tower. So obviously, at this point in time, we don't have a timing pretty much on any of this. We're kind of working internally on our own head of construction for phase 1 would start at the earliest in 5 years from now. Obviously, given that construction, it's probably from there you have design and construction. So it's probably a 36-month construction process. It's 3 years plus design and that. So really phase 1 would open in probably 10 years, give or take, right? Phase 2 is obviously contingent on Costco. Costco does have control for the next 20 years. However, they could also walk away tomorrow. And so really this gives us the opportunity to be ready whenever they do happen to not be there anymore. Again, obviously that is their choice at this point, not ours. And so we're just kind of being ready for the next phase of development in the future. So there isn't really a timeline guess on that. Again, they do have control for 20 years, but they could also tell us tomorrow that they're leaving. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it, if that makes sense on the 2 phases, is phase 2 doesn't really have a date particular, and if that helps.
Great. And the streetscape improvements on Fern are part of phase 2, and the streetscape improvements on Block D of 15th Street are also part of phase 2. Is that correct?
So we do have an option on Fern Street that we could put an on-street not protected bike lane on Fern if we wanted to get rid of the parallel parking. Currently, the parallel parking is highly used, and so that is probably not advisable based on discussions with staff. However, it does fit, and we could do, it wouldn't be the full kind of curb protected, but we could do that if we wanted as a phase 1 option for the bike lanes. Again, I don't believe there's enough curb length on 15th to do a phase 1 bike lane. However, we would be happy to discuss that if that was possible within the existing curb to curb while Costco remains.
Got you. Thank you. All right. Other commissioner questions and comments? Commissioner Theo, go ahead.
Yes. taking from this slide that's currently up, in fact, could you explain a bit more about I think it's the 13th Street and Grant Street intersection right there? What was that about with, was it a pedestrian or intended pedestrian priority kind of pathway, or was that bike facilities? I'm confused about that, sorry.
So the green ribbon is a part of the Pentagon City Sector Plan, and it is a pedestrian and bike path with biophilic elements that go through the entire neighborhood. And so the sector plan showed previously kind of a line along 14th Street. However, we have too many curb cuts to be really comfortable on 14th to provide that access. So we have moved that to the north. So the goal would be that it's kind of a shared use path with lots of plantings, lots of biophilic locations for art, following the Pentagon City Sector Plan guidelines for the green ribbon.
And I guess with this current plan, it's intended to be on the south side of 13th Street between Fern and Grant, and then switch over to the north side of the street from Grant to Hayes.
Correct. On B1, I don't have a ground floor plan, unfortunately, with me at the moment. But there will be active small shop retail on the south side of B1. However, it's anticipated that it'll be larger big box retail in B. So obviously that is there'll be less entrances. So it'll be much more compatible to kind of a greenway path. And so that's why it's on the north side, west of Grant Street. And then the goal is to create kind of an interesting, cool crosswalk concept as it transitions to the park side in that's east of Grant Street.
And I guess I just have some concerns about that. As cycling, I always prefer to have as few breaks and changes to have a cyclist stop and cross the street and then cross the street again, when they could ideally just stay on the same side. I know this is intended as sort of a multi-use, not necessarily dedicated cycling, but people will be using their bikes through this.
We understand it's not ideal. However, again, there's anticipated to be small shops on E. So the idea is that it probably won't be as conducive when you have small shop retail across the street. So it'd be better active. However, again, obviously we are in such a high level and we're not into all the details. So maybe in the future there'll be adjustments, but this is kind of where we've identified today, where there's the least amount of pedestrian and bike and user kind of conflicts.
I guess as one last closing comment on that, or question, for that intersection of Grant and 13th, would it be, or could it be considered to have, I forget the name off the top of my head, but sort of like the shuffle intersection
Yes,
where.
we have talked about it where it could be like kind of crosswalk that could do that. Again, we did not draw that here because obviously that would need to be studied with the traffic and the design, but that is something we have discussed as a possibility.
Because at least that would eliminate my concerns about for cyclists having to stop, then turn right or turn one direction and then stop and wait and then cross over again.
Exactly. And I think the other thing we've talked about is because this is not anticipated to be a lit signal, it is anticipated to be a four-way stop. You could do something like the Dutch turns, right? So there are a number of ways that we could design this so that there is efficient movement for everybody. But again, we're just not at that level of detail at this point.
And you do expect that there could be enough right of way for those Dutch turns? I mean, it's.
I don't know the exact dimensions of all of those off the top of my head. However, the sidewalk being 8 to 12 feet wide plus the 4 to 8 feet, I mean, that's that's 16 feet that the whole park thing is going over there. So obviously we don't want it to be taken up by just that and not have any of the biophilic elements, but it is a very large right of way that kind of does do that whole route.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Ludlow.
Yeah, a couple of questions. One, you mentioned that you have an expectation that 64% of the trips would be transit and 9% active. And I think you said based on similar buildings. So I'm just curious, is that from like observations or estimates of what you think will happen? Do you have other buildings that are very similarly situated where you've studied that in depth?
It's estimates at this point. We did that in coordination with DES staff and other studies that have been done in the area that have consistent non-auto assumptions.
Okay, so we have other DES studies that have validated through observations or data. That's kind of the level. Okay, that's great. That's fantastic. Just another kind of comment on the green ribbon. As somebody who is a bicyclist periodically on Arlington's system, especially the on-street system, I commend the fact that there is going to be a bicycle facility woven into the green ribbon, because the best bike lane is a bike lane that's not on a road. It's away from a road. It's separate. And so from my perspective, and this just could be a preference, but if resources are going to be if resources could be concentrated on making the green ribbon bike trail more usable, more fluid, even wider, in lieu of having bike lanes on every street, I think that's a sensible perspective, as long as it had good connectivity. I think there's a trade-off, but just from my experience, I feel like it's safer to be separate from the cars. And if we're building a ribbon, which is a wonderful thing is a wonderful amenity to build through the center of those blocks, I would hope that we would favor the bike amenities, the bicycle amenities in there versus on the streets if we have to make decisions. Thank you.
Commissioner Flores.
Is there, I have a couple of questions on the green ribbon replacement. The way that the placement that was recommended with it going up under 14th Street would lead into the Met Park, almost fabrication of the green ribbon that is currently existing. But to my understanding, if you go up another block, it's a difference in the park altogether, and so it doesn't have almost a pre-established flow from this segment into the block that Amazon Met Park is. Is there any plans to combat that, or could we look at possibly doing a split of the green ribbon like we have on the 12th Street, 11th Street area, just above?
I think I'm back on. Sorry, I got kicked off the internet. So the issue on having it on 14th Street currently is that all of our service for the existing Milton, the future B1 buildings are anticipated to be on 14th Street. So there are many curb cuts for loading, for parking entrances and whatnot on there. So there would be a lot of conflicts to have the path going that way. And then the same would happen for blocks D and E here. And so you have all of the curb cuts. And so really the thought was that while through the park you wouldn't have the conflict, there would be too many to have a nice east-west connection. And so obviously that's why we suggested the 13th Street connection here. And so I think overall the goal would be that hopefully there'd be a way to connect to the park, that it would work, even though it was not really anticipated with the design of the Met Park at the front. Unfortunately, the way our blocks are oriented, that's the best locations for service for those buildings.
Okay. And then to echo my fellow commissioners, isolating a safe bike path journey for individuals who are traversing through this area is incredibly important. The green ribbon, as you know, is established to do a service to both pedestrians as well as bicyclists. And I would encourage looking at the paths of travel between those two different transit users, because I think there might be space to almost divide and conquer and have a path towards the open green space for pedestrian users or bicyclists if they're going towards there, but then also have a green ribbon extend on the other side of the road to allow for safe bicycle transit.
I mean, agreed. I think we fully agree with all the bike lanes, especially on Fern and 15th and Hayes, because those are very heavily trafficked roads. The goal would be that the interior streets are much smaller. They're actually only local service provided traffic for the existing buildings. And so hopefully that would be much safer, and that we would provide the kind of those high speed bike lanes on the edges of the property rather than all the way through. And then hopefully kind of the shared, more casual paths through the green ribbons.
Okay, I know this project is, of course, in inner workings. I'd love to see a map that divides the path of pedestrians versus cyclists the next time we meet, because I think it would paint a better picture of what the proposed.
Yeah, I mean, I think no one has built any sections of the green ribbon yet, so no one
Correct.
really has any full idea what it actually is going to become when a segment does get built. So I think that's going to be a huge discussion as the first project comes forward. And maybe it's us and maybe it's not. That's really still to be determined at this time, who's going to be the first one to build a portion. And so I think that project is really going to set the stage that we're all going to have to follow. And so I don't know that we'll be the ones who come up with that section, right? And so I think we really looked for your guidance as this continues to come forward, to make sure that you all think about that, even without us in our project.
Commissioner Furman.
So I think I have a sense of the answer of this based off the maps that you provided, some of the illustrations, and also what has been done on 14th Street with the completion of the Milton. I wanted to applaud some of the traffic calming that has been implemented there, because both as a driver, cyclist, and pedestrian in that space, it feels very different from the parking lot that was there before, obviously. So what are some of the measures that you all are hoping to implement on these interior streets to help ensure that they are in fact going to be used at lower speeds, and that, Grant Street doesn't become something that's a pretty rapid north-south road between these intersections? Anything you can share in terms of what design choices you're making there?
Yeah, so all the streets are going to have on-street parking, and where we can implement, we'd like to implement curb extensions at the intersections. We do have to be able to accommodate larger trucks, so those will be evaluated at that time. And as Abby mentioned, both of those internal intersections are envisioned to be four-way stops. So the shorter blocks, having the friction of the parking should induce lower speeds.
Any plans for speed humps or things that are kind of directly influencing speeds between blocks for vehicles?
Not at this time.
Okay.
We
Thank you.
have talked about elevated crosswalks. However, again, obviously we are so early that we're nowhere near it, but that is something that, especially through the blocks around, or the blocks around the park, of what does that look like? And those intersections are probably going to be different. And so maybe there's, chicanes, maybe we do something very interesting around the park, to really make sure that it's obvious that that's a people place first and not a vehicle place first place. So again, at this point in time, we're really leaving the flexibility for that to be designed in the future by leaving the space for it, but giving the space for parallel parking, which really does slow down traffic, especially on these blocks that don't fully connect all the way through to Hayes, right? So it's not, we're creating a grid. However, we are still a dead end in a ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Terry, go ahead.
I think just to pick up on that point about how do we protect pedestrians, I think just want to encourage you to think about mid-block crossings. I know for example, the current building there at Hayes and 15th, I think they actually have, their opening is in the middle of their building. So, where are those natural places where people are going to be crossing streets? And it's going to take more time and energy to go to an intersection. So, love what you're thinking about with potentially the speed bumps too, or raised crosswalks as well, but also just think about other ways to make it easy for people to get around safely.
Agreed. And I think where those locations will come as each block gets developed. And so we've kind of left room for that in the future.
Anybody else? Ms. Gabor, do you happen to have a slide that has the county manager's recommended motion? No. Well, I appear to have lost access to the board report. So
I do have the board report though, so let me share that. I just thought of that.
SharePoint hates me. Great. Thank you very much. All right, then I'm going to move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the Arlington County Board adopt the ordinance for a phase development site plan amendment to amend the Pentagon Center phase development site plan to revise phasing, site layout, and building placement, adjust land use mix, increase density allocation and building heights, and revise the Pentagon Center urban design guidelines located at 1200 South Fern Street, subject to the conditions of the ordinance as outlined in our draft board report.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Theo. Is there any discussion of the motion? I will just say I would urge staff and the applicant to continue to look at whether there are transportation improvements that can be moved into phase one, as right now they feel very, very backloaded into phase two. Even if that means moving a curb you wouldn't otherwise have to move. Seeing no other hands, we will move into a vote. Commissioner Coleman. Did we lose Commissioner Coleman? Apparently. Commissioner Flores.
Aye.
Commissioner Furman.
Aye.
Commissioner Hussein.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Locker.
Aye.
Commissioner Ludlow.
Aye.
Commissioner Terry.
Aye.
Commissioner Theo.
Aye.
And I will also vote yes. That passes 9-0. Thank you very much for the applicant and to staff.
Next, we have smart scale applications with staff member Richard Rossman.
Good evening, commissioners. I am here for our every 2 years application to the Commonwealth's Smart Scale Transportation Capital Funding Program. This is the largest program in the state for discretionary funding. Lots of applications every cycle, hundreds of millions of dollars for pretty much any ground transportation mode. I won't go into the weeds on how projects are evaluated, just to simply say that highway congestion has the highest weight in Northern Virginia. Staff is proposing applications for 3 projects totaling $85 million. I apologize, in the summary of the draft board report, that is from a previous cycle. That's what happens when you do it every 2 years and use the same template. We are proposing to apply for 3 projects for $85 million. And I can go into additional detail on any of these projects if commissioners desire. First project will be the Arlington Boulevard at Washington Boulevard interchange access improvements with an ask of $35 million. This is the #1 safety problem in the county in terms of intersections and interchanges. And we think we have a very good solution coming out of the VDOT project pipeline study. Second project is Glebe Road safety improvements between I-66 and Columbia Pike. These would construct safety improvements at 9 intersections along that corridor, and that is coming out of the VDOT STAR study, which is a safety-based study. And then the third application is a joint application that we are submitting with the city of Alexandria, and we're actually having it submitted by the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, the NVTA. This is both for procedural and sort of technical reasons. This is the application is for the I-395 Shirlington Rotary and South Glebe interchange improvements for $25 million. The city-county line roughly bisects the Shirlington Rotary, so it does fall into 2 jurisdictions. Under Smart Scale, there is no way to submit a joint application as a locality. You have to have a single sponsor, and VDOT cannot submit to Smart Scale because it's a VDOT program. So the other solution is to have a regional body like the NVTA submit on our behalf, which is what we have agreed to with the authority. It also happens to fit well in that it is a regionally significant project as it's located on I-395. So in this case, there are safety improvements in the interchange rotary and at the collector distributor lane coming off of South Glebe. This is a VDOT study that was completed initially in 2020, and then by mutual request of the city and county, the study was revisited, and they're in the process of generating an interchange access report, or IAR, with updated information and some slight tweaks to the recommendations. So again, 3 projects applying for 85 million. Smart Scale is 100% state, although projects are required to be federally eligible in case the state needs to put federal aid funds on what goes into them in the state budget, but there is no local match required. And I think at that point, we'll also note that the county has also applied to the federal Safe Streets and Roads for All program for the Arlington Boulevard, Washington Boulevard project. We will allocate across both funding sources in the event of multiple fund awards. With that, I will pause for questions. And as I said, I can go into additional details, and I have the concept drawings and sketches that were submitted with the Smart Scale pre-applications. Smart Scale is a 2-phase process where you submit a pre-application in March and then the final application in August. And so I can bring up the sketch plans for the pre-applications that were submitted at that time, understanding that there may be minor refinements going into the final applications, which are due August 1st.
Great. Thank you very much. I think I'm not even going to say that. I'm just going to jump into Commissioner Ludlow has his hand up. Go ahead, Commissioner Ludlow.
Yeah, Mr. Roisman, did we not apply as a county for a federal grant for the intersection of Washington and 50? Was it a raised grant? And
we did. That's the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant,
okay.
Which we applied for recently. And if we are able to get that, then we will split the funding across sources. Unfortunately, at the time of that application, VDOT had not done additional refinements to their costs, so the ask to SS4A is significantly lower than what we're asking for Smart Scale. But we could make it work with a variety of funding sources if we are awarded them.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Was not calling into question the need for the project at all. Just wanted an update on what other application submitted.
Absolutely, it's important enough that we're pursuing multiple sources. So
fantastic.
Great. If you have this detail on what is expected to go forward with the Shirlington inner circle,
just
if you have drawings or something, that would be great. I was familiar with the 2020 study, but I don't know what's changed.
Let's see. Switch here. That should be the board report. This is 2 pages. This one covers the rotary itself, and let me try to zoom a little bit so we can see the sketch. Everyone is able to see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this is for the rotary itself, and then I have a second page that just covers the improvements to the merge for the southbound Glebe on-ramp into the CD lanes. So, and I'm going to focus on the county side just because, the city is handling its own piece, but the main change is the change in this ramp coming off of the southbound 395 to provide a direct connection here to Campbell Street. This is a left and a through left with a new signal. Staff has expressed some concerns to VDOT about their simulation modeling for this location as well as the next one downstream here at Campbell and South Quincy. So we are asking VDOT to allow us the flexibility as further investigation is done to consider putting a prohibition in there for the through movement. The modeling shows some potential overloads of the ramp itself and queuing in high volume conditions, as well as problems with this intersection here, which is one of the 100% intersections of the Shirlington Center. However, there are significant safety improvements to taking people off of that horrible merge that comes into the rotary under existing conditions. So we still think it's an improvement, but it just needs to be watched carefully to make sure it's not overloaded. And the trick is having VDOT grant us the flexibility to look at a prohibition in the future without having to do another interchange access report and a highly detailed analysis that we've just done in this study. So if there are additional questions, I can hold on here, or I can go to the second page to look at the merge change. It's fairly simple.
I have one
Go ahead.
follow-up. Yeah, my main concern on that, I mean, essentially, it's a conversion of the rotary into kind of a modified rotary, and I would be very interested to understand what those simulation results indicate. What you would not want to see, of course, is with a relatively short off-ramp, given the periodically high volumes of traffic, I really don't think you would want to see any backup onto I guess it would be the 395 collector too far back.
No, that is the main line at that point.
Oh,
So
it is the main.
that is the concern, and that's something that we flagged with VDOT. However, I will point out that under existing conditions, this existing merge here on the rotary is, a high volume crash location, and because of the condition where this traffic is basically placed at a stop sign with a very poor sight distance, there are times where you have similar queuing under existing conditions. So, but that is the main concern, as well as the performance here at this intersection that we are flagging with VDOT and making sure that they are examining carefully as they go forward.
Yeah, the issue is I'm recognizing that is a high crash location. If you shift the queue, you can end up potentially having a much more problematic location if there is the much greater speed differential with the backed up queue and the main line. So anyway, thank you.
Yep.
All right. And then there's a little bit more to this, right? Is that
sure? Yes, this is the improvement this is South Glebe and the on-ramp from South Glebe here to the collected distributor road. And so what we're basically doing is a little bit of realignment to get more of a merge lane than exists currently. So it's, striping and a little bit of milling and paving to get an additional merge point and taper here to try to improve the operations of that. Because again, this is a situation where under existing conditions, because of the poor merge, there's queuing here, as well as some high crash locations at this merge point. I will say that, you can see here that the CD lane is also accepting traffic from this ramp down here, which is from northbound South Glebe onto southbound 395. And we had pushed VDOT to look at that, but they deemed it to be out of scope in the original study, as well as the study refresh.
Are we still seeing significant queues? This used to occur frequently from northbound 395 onto Glebe Road.
This movement here.
Yeah. Has that improved at all over the last few years? It used to be very problematic, and again, you would have that potential for a crash between basically a stopped car and a mainline movement on the freeway.
I would have to confirm with our traffic operations people. My sense is that it may have improved slightly, but is still a known hotspot. And again, I think that if we'd been able to include all of the Glebe interchange as part of the study refresh, we might have been able to address that. I would argue that the Glebe interchange itself warrants its own study, but that's ultimately to lobby VDOT to be able to look at. So,
all right, thanks for explaining this. This area, in fact, all of 395 is just white knuckle driving. It's a stressful thing to do. I try to avoid it.
It's a lot of interchange movements in a short distance.
Yep.
Great. Any other questions about Shirlington Circle? Cool. Can we talk about the Glebe project? When the pipeline study did its last public engagement, there was a lot of criticism lobbed at VDOT, I think appropriately, that it was very inadequate what was being proposed, that it would do very little to curb the speeding that Arlington's own speed studies show are problematic on Glebe, and that much of the improvements that they show appear to be more capacity improvements than they are safety improvements. A lot of lengthening turn pockets and that sort of thing. Have there been changes since the last public engagement to this project?
There have not been any substantive changes. And I would say that, speed is obviously a safety issue, but the STARS framework is somewhat limited in terms of what we can do on a corridor of this length. This is almost a 2-mile corridor. I think had VDOT thought about it more carefully, they might have broken it into multiple discrete segments, which means we might have been waiting more years for some of the improvements that did come out in this study. The county is making plans to do a full corridor look at Glebe at some point in the midterm, following the model that was done for the George Mason Drive study. And I think that will allow a more holistic look than VDOT simply is allowed to do under STARS. Having said that, there are some safety improvements at some of these locations, including realignment of bus stops. In some cases, turn pockets are impacting the ability to cross some of these locations more easily, particularly at places like Glebe and Carlin Springs. But VDOT has done, I think, all that they are able to do under the STARS framework in terms of what they and their consultant team has delivered that we're putting forth for Smart Scale.
All right. Can you talk more about the historic preservation impacts mentioned in the board report?
Sure. So this is at 2 locations. This is the first one here at 66. This area here, where the trail comes in, as well as this area here, have some level of historic designation, either district or individual properties. So it would be difficult to get the full width of sidewalk or multi-use trail that we are proposing here without impacts and subsequent mitigation. Again, this is fairly high level analysis. It's not a full blown historic preservation analysis or 106 analysis. It's simply what's been done at this level of design. We have told VDOT to build in the additional cost and schedule of doing the full blown analysis into the Smart Scale application, because having this trail connection here and this wider sidewalk for people coming off of the trail is a significant improvement to existing conditions. But we want to know how much time and cost it would do to be able to do it, and what levels of mitigation are appropriate for mitigation if we have to impact historic properties. The second location is at here, Glebe and Quincy and Henderson. This is the Buckingham Historic District over here. So it actually potentially impacts 2 sets of improvements. This one here in terms of getting the additional sidewalk over here within the Buckingham Historic District. And then the next one down where we're relocating bus shelters in this area, as well as the new mid-block crossing. Again, it depends on what has to be done and what gets lost in terms of relocating the bus shelters, and what that impact might be within Buckingham.
Thank you. Any other commissioner questions or comments on the Glebe Road project? Look online. All right. Well, I'm going to try and not well, actually, can you show Carlin Springs and Glebe? I'm sorry.
Sure. Let me just put it right back. Where'd we go? Just a moment. Here's Carlin Springs and Glebe. Again, today this is left through right. This is a dual left turn lane. So what's being proposed is removing one of those turn lanes to provide a wider pedestrian refuge, deal with signal phasing and timing. so that when the double left comes in here and this moves to a 3 right, there's a protected phase for the pedestrians crossing this, as well as additional walk time for pedestrians crossing over here. This is a main walking route from all the neighborhoods down here to get to the Metro Rail station, either through Ballston Quarter or on a number of sidewalk paths through the alley that's going to be part of the Macy's redevelopment or on regular streets. So this is a fairly heavy movement right here, as well as a fairly heavy vehicular movement, necessitating the need for having the double left over there.
So just to reiterate for my fellow commissioners, the folks turning left from the double left turn lane on Carnel and Springs will never be given a green to do so while pedestrians are crossing at the same time. That conflicting movement crossing Glebe.
Yes, that's what the protected phasing is for.
All right. I will support these three in an effort to not let the perfect get in the way of the good. I have serious concerns about the STARS program in general because it does not seem to produce a particularly good safety outcome. I think we've been through 3 of them over the course of the last couple of years: Glebe, Arlington Boulevard, and I think I'm forgetting a third. I think there is some good in here from bringing sidewalks up to ADA standpoint and removing utility poles from the middle of the sidewalk, which is great. But I don't think anybody who we have heard from over the course of the last 10 years beating the drum that Glebe Road is a dangerous place to be is going to be satisfied with the improvements that are in this project. So my concern that I'm going to choke down and not worry about is that, you know, this puts off any further improvements to Glebe, right? People are going to be like, oh, well, let's wait and see what improvements, you know, how things improve from the Glebe project, the STARS project. And I really hope that we don't do that because Glebe sucks. And I don't think it's going to suck enough less after this project. Commissioner Hussein?
Yeah, I just had a maybe unrelated question. I'm not sure if it's related, but what is the value of changing the speed limit? Does that do anything? This is a question for, I guess, everyone in the room. Like, I'm just thinking about like how we're reducing people's speeds on places like Glebe Road and Arlington Boulevard, where it's like the speed limit's like, I don't know, 40, but like you drive like it's 60 because you're, you know, it's like an open highway basically. I just don't know enough about that to know what impact that has or what other impacts that can have on changing people's speeds.
I don't want to speak for our traffic safety and vision zero people, but I will say changing speed limits is not enough. I think our experience is that there also needs to be changes to the physical condition of the roadway to provide visual cues and signals for people to actually slow down. So I think that's part of what, you know, the Chairman Slide is getting at for Glebe Road. Again, that type of improvement is simply not possible under the structure of the STARS framework. It requires a bigger, broader look at the corridor that I think is something we are looking for when the county does its own study of Glebe, but is not something that VDOT typically looks at in a STARS study, at least not on a roadway of this existing width and functional class.
If the chairman would indulge me in a fantasy, if there was a trolley or a BRT on 50, would that, how significantly would that reduce people's driving speeds? Because if it would, if we had $1 trillion, I think I'd get behind something like that. That's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Flores, I think you had your hand up next.
I did, and my commentary was already stated with the limitations of what a speed limit change can do without physical alterations. But I do have a educational question for anyone who can answer it as well. Citing the concerns that Chairman Slatt mentioned with regards to putting this forward to the STARS program will likely limit the improvement that we can do on or will add additional time and possible public or governmental staff concern to hesitate before making a change before the study is concluded and add timeline to fixing the core of the problem, which is the fact that Glebe Road inherently within this region is incredibly unsafe, dangerous, and limits our capability to provide safe streets across Arlington. And so my question is, are there alternative things that we can do instead of a study, or is instead of this particular submission, or is this the only next step that we can do to changing Glebe Road? That was a lot. I apologize.
I would say this is the first next step. To do anything bigger, either from a planning or more frankly from a capital funding piece, requires money that is simply not there. I'm going to also ask our assistant director, Ms. Crawford, to weigh in on this, because I think she can speak to this from the sort of broader picture of what we see up and down the CIP.
Yes, I can, or I can try to, I guess. Hi, everyone. Rich introduced me, so thank you. I would say it's challenging because we don't own the road. Even the roads we do own, we have challenges with for a variety of reasons, which we could get into in the 5th item on your agenda. But this will always come back to what VDOT will approve on its roadway. And we do have a good working relationship with VDOT. They've come a long way in terms of what they're willing to work with us on their roadways. But you mentioned regional. Others in the region might not agree that Glebe is a regional roadway, but it is. And that is where VDOT will also have concerns in terms of ensuring movement of people, which can include transit and other modes on the corridor.
Okay, I figured this was the most likely first next step. Just not to you all, but to the state of things. I want to express my disappointment that Glebe is unsafe, and it is my significant other's least favorite road in Arlington. That is all.
Yeah, I would just say I struggled with this a whole bunch before the meeting because I'm very angry about this study. There is a lot of very useful things in here, at the end of the day, it's always going to be expensive to fix those narrow sidewalks on either side of Glebe, and this project appears to be doing some important work to do that, whether it's undergrounding utilities or widening out the sidewalks a little bit or that sort of thing. So that's all important work that's going to have to be done one way or the other. Just at the end of the day, I am astounded that we got to the end of this study with still these huge gaps where there are not safe places to cross Glebe, especially immediately north of 50, and that there's so little thought to addressing the speeding that happens approaching Columbia Pike at Glebe Road, which I think also is tied into the lack of safe crossings. When the cars know they've got blocks and blocks and blocks so that they can go where they're not going to have to stop for anybody crossing the street, they just keep hitting that accelerator. So that's why I've come around to support, but I'm just sad that the STARS safety study seems to be doing so little of the important work to improve safety on Glebe Road. I know other folks had questions. I'm sorry, I keep blathering on. No, okay, apparently we've dealt with them. Alrighty then, which of these tabs is the correct tab? Oh, great. Commissioner Lantelmi, go ahead.
Not to pile on, but I will anyway. And I sort of agree that for this STAR study on Glebe, the perfect is the enemy of the okay, just okay. These improvements are welcome, so I will vote in favor. But I can tell you one thing, as also a member of the Planning Commission, for years we have talked about Glebe Road going through Ballston and how it is essentially a wall. And it has contributed, we think, to the failure of a lot of the retail on the west side of Glebe. It's hard to cross. It's just not so much hard as it's intimidating. It's way too wide. The entire Glebe Road corridor through Ballston really needs to be rethought, replanned in order to make it more of a street rather than a traffic sewer. This came up with the Macy's project and the requirement for the left turn lane to go into it. And there was a lot of frustration with that too. So, you know, all of this, we're doing little bits here and there, but not really looking at the fundamental problem with Glebe Road, at least through Ballston. And I acknowledge all the way to Columbia, my fellow commissioners have raised very good comments about that. But I'm really focused on Ballston right now. And that is something that does need to be a full-blown study, whether it's part of a larger Ballston study or just Glebe Road on its own. It is not working to make Ballston what it should be, a true urban environment. So that's just my comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lantelmi. All right, seeing no other hands online or hands here, I will move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board adopt the resolution authorizing Arlington County's participation in round 6 of Smart Scale, including applying for funding for the Arlington Boulevard at Washington Boulevard interchange access improvements, the Glebe Road safety improvements from I-66 to Columbia Pike, and the 395 Shirlington Rotary and South Glebe Road interchange improvements.
Seconded.
Seconded by Commissioner Furman. Any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, we will move to a vote. Did we get Commissioner Coleman back? I think we did. Nope, maybe not. Commissioner Flores?
Aye.
Commissioner Furman?
Aye.
Commissioner Hussein?
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi?
Aye.
Commissioner Locker?
Aye.
Commissioner Ludlow?
Aye.
Commissioner Terry?
Aye.
Commissioner Thea?
Aye.
And I will also vote yes. That passes 9-0.
Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Roisman.
Now we have the Commuter Assistance Program Strategic Plan with staff member Eric Balia.
Actually, I'll defer to Sarah Crawford in the room to kick us off.
Excellent. Thanks, Eric. I'm Sarah Crawford. I'm going to kick us off. We have before you today the Commuter Assistance Program Strategic Plan, what we affectionately call the CAPSPA, because we needed another terribly able to be pronounced acronym. This is, I'm not going to try to steal all of the thunder, but this is a requirement from the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. It is an operational plan, so it's not sort of a long-term visionary plan. It tries to strike a little bit of the balance because we want it to be a little bit longer term than the requirement. But we're bringing it before you today for comment and some feedback. So with that, Eric, I don't know if you wanted to say a few words before we hand it over to Laura.
I would just comment that I'm Eric Balliot. Good evening, commissioners. I'm the Transportation Research and Site Plan Development Manager with Arlington County Commuter Services. And our presenter tonight will be Laura Biala, who is the president and CEO of Foursquare ITP. We contracted with STV and Foursquare to help us produce this plan. And so she's going to give an overview of the work that we've done so far and the recommendations that we've produced, again, as Sarah noted, for your comment. So I'll turn it over to Laura, please.
Thanks, Eric and Sarah. I am not able to share my screen. Would somebody be able to give me that permission, please?
Yes.
Thanks. There
That should
we
do
go.
it.
Okay. Great. And let me just put this on full screen mode. Okay. Everybody can see in here?
Yep.
Okay. Great. So as Sarah mentioned, this plan is a requirement of DRPT. The purpose of it is to assess the current program, and I'll describe what that is in just a moment, along with the needs of commuters. And we have commuters in quotes because you'll see as we continue through the presentation that we're really trying to focus the TDM program in Arlington County on trips beyond commuting, so all types of trips. And when I say TDM, I should just clarify what that means. I think everybody on this commission probably knows, but it's transportation demand management, which is the overall, I guess, another word for commuter assistance programs, basically, programs that help inform people about all their different options for traveling around the county. So that's one of the purposes. The next purpose of the plan is to kind of, as Sarah said, plan the services that are going to be operated over the next 5 years. And the third is the plan is required to obtain funding from the state. So we started working on this plan last August. Throughout the development of the plan, we've obtained feedback from the staff at ACCS, other Arlington Department of Environmental Services staff, and we've had several workshops with internal folks as well as stakeholders from various organizations throughout the county, chambers of commerce, BIDS, the Independence Center, universities, MWCOG, NVTC, and so forth, and as well as some input from Chris as a member of the Arlington Transportation Commission. So most of you probably are familiar with these icons and logos. This is kind of the full suite of programs that are offered by Arlington County Commuter Services. And we'll get into what those mean in a moment. This is a really basic organizational chart of the Bureau, but the key point that we wanted to share here is that there are four county staff members who work on in the Arlington County Commuter Services Bureau. One is Eric, the Transportation Research and Site Plan Development Manager, and then there are 3 other county staff. The remainder of the program is operated by contractors to the county. So I'll quickly go through what the program does now in case anybody's not familiar. A big part of what the program does is business-to-business outreach and education and incentives. That's working with employers, multifamily residential buildings, commercial properties, hotels, schools, on a variety of programs so that they can encourage the people that work there or visit their locations to get there in a way other than driving alone. So they assist with employers with implementing transit benefits. They provide lots of information for people and try to encourage people to take transit, bike, walk, carpool, etc. The program also provides assistance for site plans. So when a development is approved for development, as I'm sure you know, they have certain TDM conditions that they have to meet many times. And so ACCS's role is to help the properties during the construction phase to implement the requirements that have been imposed and then monitor the implementation of those requirements over time and then monitor performance of the development. So monitoring that they're implementing things that they're supposed to, such as a bike room or bike racks, but also conducting surveys with with the properties to check on mode split for people visiting the site. Another thing that ACCS does is marketing. So your typical kind of website, social media marketing, but also they attend a lot of community events, farmers markets, etc., to kind of get the word out on different ways to travel around the county. And then there's also what we call commuter and traveler support. So you might be familiar with the Commuter Information Center, 703-228-RIDE, where people can call to get information about transportation options, to purchase fare media, and to get information about art. The program also offers fare pass sales for transit at their commuter stores. There's 4 throughout the county, as well as a mobile commuter store that goes to various locations, and also provides fare pass purchases through commuterdirect.com, so online or by calling the number. And the program also provides all kinds of brochures and schedules and information that people might need. The next to last thing that the program provides is research and reporting. It's a program called Mobility Lab, and through that program, they conduct a bunch of TDM and transportation research as well as work with the site plans on conducting the surveys that I mentioned before, along with other things. I won't read everything that's on the slide. The last thing that the program does is work on promoting bicycle and pedestrian travel, as well as overseeing the operation of Capital Bike Share. So ACCS staff actually oversee the contract with Capital Bike Share operator, as well as they plan the additions to the network and also promote programs to provide low cost access to Capital Bike Share for low income populations. So really quickly going through the impacts that ACCS has, and the latest data that we have is for 2022, so that's what we'll report on. The ACCS in 2022 assisted more than 44,000 commuters shift to non-single occupancy vehicle travel. Most of those were to new modes and 21% were shifting to telework. And altogether, those mode shifts eliminated 37,000 daily vehicle trips off the road and 644,000 daily vehicle miles traveled and the associated emission reductions. Another thing that the program achieved in 2022 is just societal cost savings. So by reducing the amount of miles traveled, there's reduced air pollution, of course, congestion reduction, deferring road construction that wouldn't need to be built, avoiding crashes and so forth. And this impact report, which is based on a nationally approved methodology for calculating the impacts of these types of programs, determined that it was a 4.3 time return on investment for the funding that was spent on the program. Now, moving on to what the program actually did, and we have that information for 2023. It provided guidance and services to 800 employers. About half of those provide transit benefits, which are either in the form of pre-tax benefits or actual financial incentives. They worked with 360 multifamily residential buildings and 100 commercial buildings. Worked with more than 250 buildings that have site plan conditions to make sure that they're implementing their TDM measures. Also work with a lot of retail partners, more than 600, to make sure that there's information on travel information at these retail locations, and achieved more than 4,000 pledges from residents of Arlington County, residents and workers, to eliminate at least one SOV trip a week through their car-free diet campaign, and also held a number of events, as I talked about, throughout the county to provide information on different ways to travel. And also finally managed Capital Bike Share, which has more than 900 bicycles at 107 stations in the county, with nearly 300,000 trips originating in Arlington on that system. The other parts of ACCS, the commuter store, sold more than 100,000 Fare Pass products. That's for all kinds of transit, as well as for Star and iRide student cards, and served 300,000 visitors. So those are people who go to the stores for information, not necessarily to purchase a pass. They, through Commuter Direct, sold and processed more than 100,000 passes for more than 100,000 customers, which was comprised of 300,000 passes. So some customers purchased more than one pass, obviously. And then also through the Commuter Information Center, they fielded 20,000 phone calls and a number of emails, which include everything, as I mentioned, questions and complaints about art, how to buy a fare, questions about putting smart benefits onto their smart card, things like that. And then the Distribution Center, which distributes a lot of brochures and information to employers, residents, hotels throughout and individuals throughout the county. They are also responsible for updating the ART bus stops whenever there's a service change. So moving on to the next part of our plan, we did do a look at, and I won't spend long on this, but we did do a quick look at the demographics and characteristics of the county. None of this will be a surprise to all of you. The county does skew younger than Virginia as a whole, and of course is very diverse in terms of race and ethnicity, as well as income levels. And we also made sure to look at employers, because a lot of the program is focused on reaching out to employers. And while there are 9,600 employers in the county, Only 540 of them have more than 50 employees. And so those are the larger the employer, the bigger bang for the buck in terms of what ACCS can do. So we want to make sure that they're focused on those employers that can then in turn impact the most travel to their locations. And we noted also that while 63% of employment in Arlington is in professional services and government, which can tend to make hybrid or completely remote work possible, the other 29% is unlikely to be the kind of work that can be done from afar. And so there's a lot of folks that need assistance with actually getting to their jobs and can't just telecommute. Finally, we looked at commute destinations for where Arlington residents are going and where people are coming to Arlington from. And I know this is probably hard to read, but I believe this presentation was shared with you. If not, I'm sure we can make it available. Just looking at where people are coming to and from so that the county, the ACCS employees can reach out to the right targets and know exactly what type of information to share. Finally, we did look at target markets for where we want the plan to aim. And as I mentioned before, we collectively decided that we want to look both at recurring trips, which is primarily work and school, the kind of place that people go every day or most days. But we also want to look at non-recurring trips. So making sure that the program is focusing on how people are traveling for any reason, whether it's going to visit a friend, go shopping, go to the doctor, and so forth. And while the program will continue to focus on all types of trips for all types of people, we wanted to make sure that it particularly looks at some additional focus on areas that maybe have been not left out, but not emphasized in the past. So looking for work trips, looking at how ACCS can help folks who have recurring work trips during the second or third shift or on weekends, so kind of the non-traditional 9 to 5, as well as making sure that the multifamily residential outreach is focused not only on the newer buildings, but also some of the older buildings and affordable housing within the county. And again, looking at providing some information to the ACCS staff so that they can look at where in the county they might want to focus to make sure they hit on those equity communities, whether they're low income, people of color, or people accessing low wage jobs, which tend to, again, have more of a requirement to be in person and also can be kind of off time from when the most transit is available. Really quickly, we did update the vision and mission of ACCS. And I won't read them, but essentially the program, I'll talk about the mission in particular, is to educate and empower everyone who travels to, through, and within Arlington with useful information about all different ways to get around. And we list them out there to be very clear about what modes we're talking about. We also updated the goals. The first is about providing education, outreach, and encouragement about how to get around. The second goal is about increasing the mode share of trips in Arlington that are taken by these modes. The third is about organizational and operational effectiveness of the program. So working to ensure that the program is operating most effectively, as well as that the program is funded in a diverse way. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. The funding for the program is largely from one source, which is not necessarily sustainable. And then on the fourth goal is about leveraging data and key performance indicators to better evaluate ACCS and allow the program to pivot and be more flexible with the access to information. With that, I'll turn to the program recommendations, and I will go through the next 6 slides that are focused on 6 key areas of where we came up with recommendations for how the program can improve. So first of all, these are just some highlights. We're recommending a rebrand of ACCS, which stands for Arlington County Commuter Services. So kind of taking away that focus from commute trips to all trips. Updating, consolidating the branding and websites. You saw that slide earlier with quite a few different brands. There's a lot of websites as well. So updating, consolidating that so that people who are looking at it can have a better sense of what their options are and have the information be a little bit more clear. As I mentioned before, focusing on equity populations, but not at the exclusion of all the other populations, just giving it a little bit more of an emphasis moving forward. Performance reporting, better collaboration between the TDM group, which is ACCS, as well as Arlington Transit. There is a lot of crossover today, but there's opportunity for those two programs to work more hand in hand than they are now. A little bit of streamlining of the site plan oversight process, which I mentioned. There are people who work for ACCS who reach out to the employers and multifamily residential buildings to make sure that they're complying with their site plans, but there's also people reaching out in general, and there can be some confusion. So streamlining that and making sure that the clients that they're working with have kind of a single point of contact. And then finally, developing a plan for funding resiliency. And now I'll highlight some additional highlights. So again, what I'm going to talk about in these next 6 slides are just modifications that we're suggesting. We're not suggesting that everything else that exists be thrown out, but these are some, we didn't want to spend the time talking about what the program's already doing and continuing it, but this is what we're talking about having some changes. So first of all, on the business-to-business outreach to employers, residential buildings, et cetera, focusing on some partnerships to be able to reach people who are in more of a position to change habits. So realtors when people are moving, and then HR and employers for when people are coming into a new job. On the employer side, working on expanding transit benefit program information, as well as increasing the focus of providing those transit benefits out to low wage workers. They're right now primarily available to office workers. On the residential side, I mentioned this already, expanding the programming from where it is to additional older multi-tenant buildings, affordable housing. On the hotel side, designating a primary point of contact because they have unique needs, and trying to consolidate that amongst the team that's doing the outreach. On the school side, right now the outreach that ACCS does to schools is as employers, but we're suggesting that expand to develop a formal program for schools that is targeted beyond the staff and teachers, but also to students and families. And I already mentioned this last one about streamlining roles. Marketing and promotion. We mentioned the rebrand already. We also mentioned the consolidated branding and online information. Evaluating and updating social media strategy to current trends. There's a lot more that the program can be doing to be more active on social media and be more of a dynamic marketing program. On the same vein, offering new and dynamic marketing campaigns outside of Car-Free Diet that uses new technologies to reach people through targeted digital outreach. This next one is leveraging participants that are in the low fare pilot program, as well as the community partner program for Capital Bike Share, to have access to those individuals so that there can be more direct outreach to the low income and people of color populations in the county. And then also, this is sort of a structural change, but the marketing team is divided up across many of those columns within the org chart, and we're suggesting that it be consolidated for more streamlined branding and consolidated marketing. On the commuter and traveler support area, some recommendations for simplifying the call-in menu and branding of the call-in center. Recommending to the county to do some further reevaluation of the commuter information center and the commuter stores to make sure they're meeting the needs of today's travelers, and then reevaluate the breadth of brochure distribution because there's a lot of inventory at the distribution center for transit schedules from all over the region, and trying to reevaluate whether that's the right role for Arlington County to be playing. On the innovation planning and research side, we're suggesting to reevaluate the goals and purpose of the research program and the studies that it conducts so that it can kind of get more targeted in what it's looking at. Evaluating, as I mentioned, better internal staff collaboration and coordination between the TDM and transit programs to make sure that customers are getting consistent and comprehensive information. Working with DRPT to broaden the use and application of the state-administered CMAQ funding beyond commute trips. So CMAQ funding is the funding source that is the majority of the funding for this program. And while it is allowable to be used on non-commute trips, there's some confusion about the use. So working with DRPT to make sure that that ACCS can use the funding for all types of trips. And finally, I mentioned this, exploring new funding sources for resiliency. And the last one is, while ACCS collects a ton of data, there is a lot that can be done to consolidate it and streamline it so that it's more easy to analyze performance moving forward and be more nimble in making decisions based on the performance. On the TDM for site plan side, I mentioned this already about the responsibilities. And the other thing is, one of the other funding sources for ACCS is that developers, when they get their site plans approved, not only do they have to implement certain things, they also have to pay into a fund which helps to fund ACCS. And the collection of those financial contributions is a bit convoluted, and we're suggesting that the process to obtain that money be streamlined to make it easier and cost less to collect the money. The last area that ACCS operates is the art information, capital bike share, and also micromobility. And again, this is just a recommendation about better communication between county staff for art and ACCS, as well as their contractors, because there's a contractor that operates art and a contractor that operates ACCS, to make sure that the information is cross-promoted through all organizational materials. Lastly, our next steps, we're going to finalize the plan. We had a presentation a few weeks ago with the Disability Advisory Commission. We're talking with you tonight. With summer breaks, we are not speaking with these two other committees until the fall, but we will do that then and bring it to the county board for approval in September and October, because it has to be submitted to DRPT by the end of November. And then there'll be continued discussions and evaluation, because this is really just it's a strategic plan, but there's a lot of work to be done to continue to consider things and then implement it once the plan has been approved. Sorry that was so fast and I'm losing my voice, but happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you so much. I think I'll kick things off. Can you speak more about the recommendation to refocus the research area? I will speak selfishly as a transportation commissioner. This is probably the #1 most useful thing that comes out of ACCS for me. I have the 2018 residential household aggregate site plan study like as a shortcut on my desktop. So that's a particular interest to me, and it seems like we haven't seen nearly as much Arlington-focused research coming out of ACCS as we used to.
Yeah, I think that's generally the gist. There's a few, as you know, there's a few studies that ACCS conducts with certain regularity. There's the residential travel survey. There's the household travel survey, which is actually done by COG as a regional study, but Arlington does an oversample so that they get additional information, and the same for the state of the commute survey, which is regional, but Arlington gets some additional information. But all of those are only every few years. The research program of late has been very focused on conducting surveys for site plan developments, and has gotten away from being able to spend the time that they need to on Arlington focused research. And so that's sort of the gist of that recommendation, is to see how they can reduce the amount of time spent on those site plan surveys and refocus on research for Arlington.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Coleman.
I think Jim Lantomé was first. Fine.
Yeah, but I want to see if we can actually hear Commissioner Coleman
Yeah.
because I've called on him twice in the last
You can go
hour and
first,
not been able to hear him.
Commissioner Coleman.
All right. Commissioner Coleman, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. So I'm going to call on Commissioner Lantelmi.
Okay. You noticed in your statistics the number of people you say that the number of people that have converted from apparently single car driving
Yeah.
to transit, which is great. And I think those numbers are really impressive, and they're good. The counter, however, is that Metro still isn't up to pre-COVID numbers, and that's probably not just for rail, but I think for the Metro bus also. A whole lot of people went away from transit and started driving, and it isn't just people that are working from home. How does that balance out? And is there some way you could target those people to bring them back to transit and out of their cars that they went to during COVID or after COVID, because for whatever reason, they just don't want to be on the subway anymore? And do we need more studies on this? Following up to Commissioner Slatt's comment on studies.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that we don't have from that impact report is what modes they transferred to. So some of them may have transferred to walking or biking or carpooling, not necessarily transit. Although in terms of the numbers, I know region-wide, I don't know the numbers for Arlington, but I know region-wide the Metro bus ridership is back up to pre-pandemic levels, but I don't know about Metro bus in Arlington specifically. So I do think there's some additional research that can be done. Certainly in terms of reaching people who have decided to drive, who used to take transit, I think that speaks to some of the modified marketing and social media that we're recommending be done. The car-free diet has been around for a really long time, and we think there's a lot of opportunity to kind of re-engage and with fresh messaging try to reach those people that maybe have switched. Certainly going the programs where they go and meet with and reach out to the employers, and reach out to multifamily residential and go out and do street events, that kind of thing is all reaching out to everybody. It's not tailored to people who maybe used to take transit and aren't now. So I think it's just a matter of targeting the messaging to be something that would resonate with people who used to take it and have lapsed.
Thank you.
Who else? Commissioner Ludlow, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple things. First of all, I think it's commendable that the efforts that have been made to reach out to provide education on the programs that are available, especially to a much wider range of employers, including small employers. I know that Commissioner Lantelmi mentioned a statistic. I couldn't find it in the report on the conversion from single occupancy auto to transit. I don't know if you can bring that back up. Okay,
It
great.
was this.
Okay, thank you very much. These are the kind of KPIs that I think we need to be able to continue to see in the work, just so that we've got a means of tracking these types of things. So this is very good. With respect to the transit, I think this is we'll call it the physical cliff problem, where a lot of transit agencies across the country, in fact, most have simply not recovered on their heavy rail. You're right, on the bus or the commuter rail. And it's a real struggle. I mean, some areas, especially those like ours, where we've had a very significant shift to work from home, it's completely altered the behavior patterns and lifestyles of millions of people. And so I think it's naive for us to believe that there are efforts that we can undertake that will help us fully recover, at least in the short term. We may just recover over a much longer period of time. And the bigger questions are, what do we do about the physical deficits that these systems are facing up until that point? Those are big existential questions. But I would hope that we're not too naive about things becoming like they were before, because I think the world is fundamentally changed. But Others may have different opinions on that, but I think that if you're able to do more research and find out ways for Arlingtonians to reconsider, and that should be an important part of what you do.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure other commissioners might have some responses as well, but I'll just say that's another reason why we want the program to focus beyond commuters, because even if people are working from home, they're still making a lot of trips.
Commissioner Hussein.
Yeah, I just want to echo and agree with that. I think that yeah. Sorry, I'm like losing my train of thought. Yes, and I think too that I think part of that conversation is frequency and making sure that we're thinking about commuting frequencies not just in mornings and evenings, but throughout the whole day. And I think, and honestly, I think that applies maybe a little bit more heavily towards rail, especially considering Metro. You know, I think Metro is the only one because VRE is not really within our purview here. So, and that's a whole nother conversation that we can have, you know, later. But yeah, so I just want to agree that I think because our commuting patterns are changing and are probably going to be very different, then making sure that we're focusing on that rather than trying to get us back to what we were before, I think will be really important.
Anybody else? Does Foursquare have specific funding sources that they're recommending Arlington County Commuter Services explore outside of CMAQ?
We are, and I have to admit I am not remembering what they are right now. Eric or Sarah, if you happen to remember them, otherwise I can. But I will say, while they're thinking, there's no silver bullet, and CMAQ, because CMAQ is, you know, we don't see there being a problem in the foreseeable future. It's just that it's always never a good idea to have all your eggs in one basket. And there will be some additional funding from the state through, and you'll have to forgive me, I turn into a pumpkin around 9 o'clock. So my brain is a little lost. But maybe Sarah or Eric, you have some thoughts on this.
Trying to remember, we do have a chapter in the draft plan that does deal with the financial outlook for ACCS. And I believe, Laura, we do mention a number of different new federal programs, either through its EPA or through the new infrastructure law. Just looking at some of those new funding opportunities to see where there might be grants that we can apply for to do some of the work, and particularly some of the recommendations that we're producing in this plan.
Awesome. Glad to hear it, and glad to hear about, you know, this possibility that CMAQ money may not be quite as tightly constrained as DRPT seems to have led us to have held us to in the past. I know there's some great practitioners in ACCS desperately want to do some work outside of the traditional commute space with students and other folks, and have been stymied by that belief about CMAQ. So I hope we can get that cleared up. Anybody else? Commissioner Coleman, you want to take one last stab at weighing in? I've seen you go off mute, but I cannot actually hear anything you are saying, sadly. All right, and this was an information item, right? Not ready for commission action, is my recollection?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, great. Then seeing no other hands, I think we are wrapped. Thank you very much for the presentation. We don't get to hear from ACCS nearly enough.
Thank you.
All righty. Now we have a follow-up, some responses to some follow-up questions from last month's presentation on the capital improvement plan. And we have, again, Sarah Crawford.
I'm back again, and I don't have a formal presentation this time. I received some questions from you all, and I provided written responses. I'm happy to go through them, but I'll leave that at your discretion.
I sent them around pretty late to folks, so I'm not convinced that everybody got a chance to get them. I did not grok immediately when they were sent to me that they were sent just to me and not to the entire commission, so I was slow in distributing them. Do you think you could go through them quickly and that would be great.
And just before you start, they were also uploaded to the website for people who want to reference them later.
So I'm happy to talk through them. I can try to quickly pull them up on Teams if that would be helpful.
And it's just text to people with that. Okay, that would be useful.
Yeah.
All right.
Whatever people would like.
I'm hearing yes, it would be useful if they
Yes.
were pulled.
Okay, so here we go. We're going to try this because I have to join the meeting. Okay. All right, here we go. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so I think you all submitted about a dozen questions, and you started with the transit signal priority implementation. I went back and I looked at the CIP from 2019 on, and it conveniently kind of anticipates beginning transit signal priority the first year of the CIP, every adopted CIP over the past several years. So I understand the genesis of the question. We can blame the pandemic for a lot of things. This was one of them. The focus of transit was on other things at the time in terms of trying to keep transit safe and also functional for the people who needed it. But I am pleased to say that we do have a contractor on board. We do have the signal infrastructure on those corridors upgraded to be able to run transit signal priority. We have the infrastructure on the buses. So we are ready to start deploying this technology on Langston Boulevard. The point of the contractor is to monitor and make changes and recommendations for the future operation of that on Langston Boulevard. And my understanding of the schedule of this is each of these corridors will take about 8 to 9 months before they move to the subsequent corridor. So with each corridor, we're rolling out with Langston, and then the next corridor, it's listed in the CIP, and I'm blanking on it now. But if you go to the CIP page on this, it lists the corridors in their order of fiscal years. So we feel confident that we can actually hit that target with this proposed soon-to-be adopted CIP. If you don't mind, I'm going to take numbers 2 and 3 together. It's Fairfax Drive and Carlin Springs. Both slipped for similar but different reasons, and I want to cover the similar reason first. At the time of the past CIP, we did not yet have a timeline for the update of the Master Transportation Plan. Between CIPs, we were given the green light to bring that forward. We now have a contract that will begin on July 1st, which is Monday, and we will be having kickoff meetings internally with the consultant in anticipation of a fall public engagement to formally kick off the update to the MTP. What this will give us network-wide is an understanding of how the transportation network within Arlington functions, where the opportunities are to prioritize corridors based on current volumes of all modes, not just auto modes, and future needs as well. So this will allow us to better understand what are the priorities on these corridors. I'll take Carlin Springs as an example. At this point, 4 elements of the current MTP have prioritized their mode on Carlin Springs Road. In order to fully realize the enhanced services on Carlin Springs, whether it's pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, transit service, we would have to expand the right-of-way 20 feet. That's just not feasible. So we need to understand from that network analysis and also the reconciled priorities within the MTP what we can do. And so the point of starting both of these studies at the end of FY26, well, at that point in the MTP, we'll have the network analysis, we'll have the modal priorities and hierarchies, and we'll be able to launch these 2 studies. The differences between the two, one of the opportunities that we were planning to push forward on Fairfax Drive early was the Fairfax Drive Kirkwood Road intersection. Just due to funding capacity, that was deferred, and we looked at that as kind of a backhanded opportunity to be able to do the study first to ensure that the corridor-wide recommendations inform what we do at that intersection. Almost the opposite happened on Carlin Springs due to some of the safety analyses that we've learned along that corridor. The one lane road, my brain's shutting off too. But when we took the lane northbound on Carlin Springs, we tested that opportunity. It didn't work. We were asked to take it out by multiple stakeholders, APS, police. I mean, for safety reasons, it posed safety challenges. But we do have a project in the CIP to immediately widen sidewalks and provide safer pedestrian passage along Carlin Springs that will begin now. We're in the process where we should have portions of that sidewalk under construction a year from now, which is kind of lightning speed for capital projects, I'm sad to say. So hopefully that covers 2 and 3, and I should have mentioned, feel free to ask questions along the way. Okay. Okay, now we have a couple study questions. We have put the WNOD trail gap on hold. This is disappointing. I'm imagining you're disappointed. We are disappointed as well. Based on our conversations with external stakeholders, it was not clear that the county should be leading this effort or the ensuing project based on the various rights of way engaged. And at the point where we got to in conversations, what was perceived to be the burden that would be put on county park property to advance anything that other agencies would agree to. So we felt that we needed to pause and get to a different place with some of our external stakeholders.
I have a question regarding the first question's response. The contractor that the county has hired to monitor the deployment, is that a data analytical monitoring or is that a project management monitoring?
Not being completely knowledgeable on that contract, but understanding their work, I'm guessing data monitoring and analyzing.
Okay.
But I can find out the specific answer.
I think that would be really helpful here because when we look at the scheduling for the implementation itself versus the analytics of how a pilot is doing, I'd be curious to see how the timeline's been affected because I don't know that I have a full grasp of understanding about why the data analytical contract has slipped the implementation schedule.
Oh, it hasn't.
Okay.
It hasn't. That was not the issue that caused the years of delay on this.
Okay.
And I'm sorry if I
No, that's
mischaracterized
fine.
that in my comments. It was just not the priority during the pandemic.
Okay. Okay.
But this contractor is proof that progress is being made.
Progress happens, yes. Okay, so we have begun internal work on the 4-mile run trail crossing at Shirlington Road, and we anticipate engagement this fall. So more to come on that.
Awesome.
Also, another study that has been put on hold is the Iwo Jima Trail Connection Study. And the main reason for that, we added some contextual information about that, but the property owners that were involved do not have any plans on their books to advance anything at this time. So it's challenging to, I don't want to say force a project upon someone, but if they're not ready to bring it forward, we have other needs that we can address. Our Mead Street Bridge project, which it's essentially a piece of the core of Roslyn implementation. It is consistent with the 2011 recommendations in a number of ways. There are some ways where it is not consistent. While the Mead Street Bridge is not degrading to a state where it's unsafe, VDOT will likely replace it in the next, I'd say, dozen-ish years. And I don't think Public Art wanted to take that leap to install something permanent with the threat of it having to be removed at some point for reconstruction. Another thing is we've had to work with VDOT to update the interchange access report and do more modeling. So that's been something that may change some of the intersection configurations. And we've also packaged the slip lane removal at Dark Star Park with this project. So that's a change from what the project had previously anticipated. The courthouse multimodal connectivity project remains deferred due to funding capacity. It's about a $6 to $7 million project and it didn't fit. We do have, I'll kind of take these next two together, 9 and 10. We do have a number of projects in Crystal City and Pentagon City are advancing so many that we couldn't fit them all in the presentation for the board. But one thing that we are excited about is extending the protected bike lanes and expanded streetscape south on Eads to 23rd Street. That's phase 3. And so that's why the first 2 phases, they are under contract and moving forward in construction. That third phase is what I'll say extends the course of the project. And so under number 10, the first list of projects, which I won't read, were listed in the CIP document or the presentation. There are other projects within the workbook that we didn't highlight, mainly because they're farther out in the CIP and they're not active at this point. So we do anticipate studying South Hayes Street to understand the opportunities there for better connectivity and safety. We do anticipate a project on 23rd Street, Restaurant Row, west of Eads. We have a placeholder in there for regional funding. We hope that some of the projects that might come out of some of the studies would be a good contender for regional funds. I think I've mentioned a number of times here and also with the board that we don't have local placeholder funds anymore in the CIP. We just don't have the capacity. So hopefully regional funding will be an opportunity. I'll just skip to 23rd Street. We have phase 2, which extends east to Crystal Drive, but that is reliant on development. And then the 20th Street reconstruction from Route 1 to Crystal Drive is also in the CIP. That 18th Street realignment is addressed in number 11. The project's advancing and will begin engagement this coming year. And so for projects on Langston Boulevard, we don't have specific projects in the CIP. We've anticipated 2 studies, and you could say that the study will bleed into the project, and that's true. We just don't have the funding identified specific to each particular project. We have the 2 studies, which I think together total about 1.5, 1.6 million, and the remaining funds within that program would be used to fund the recommendations from those studies, the projects that drop out of them, with the full caveat, we don't know exactly what those are and we don't know what they cost, but we feel pretty good about the funding that we've populated. And then the issue with VDOT, I'm thrilled to note that I was talking with my facilities colleagues and the fire station moved in on Tuesday, which is great. The fire department moved into the fire station on Tuesday. I love to try to blame everything on PROAG these days, but I can't fully blame PROAG for that. I commend VDOT's vigilance on this new federal guidance. We're all going to be caught up in that. But what happened was the signal plan realigned crosswalks and we had to update the ramps anyway, and they wanted them further updated to the new PROAG guidance. But luckily they allowed us to break that out into another phase, but it took some conversations.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can you talk about, so just looking at the CIP document, right? We show how much money is expected to be in the Transportation Capital Fund from year to year to year to year. And it has a separate line for reserve. And then it shows a balance every year, often at least $10 million. Can you help me understand how we square that with like a $6 million project like Courthouse Multimodal not fitting into the CIP?
This is where I wish I had our transportation funds manager with us. We have both required, and I think I don't think it's legislated by the state, it might be by MVTA, but we have internal practices of levels of balance we need to maintain. I don't know them off the top of my head, I apologize. what we account for in the analyses that we do year over year is where do we land with that fund balance to ensure that we're meeting our requirements. That is taken into account in some of the implementation adjustment analyses that we do. And we actually look and see if anyone's going to notice I'm giving like inside baseball. We dip precariously low, particularly on CNI in a couple years. It's down to 1 million. So I think that the way the implementation adjustment layers on either before or after the fund balance line item, I should pull this up so I'm looking at it. I hear what you're saying.
I think I hear what you're saying now. Like if it weren't for the implementation adjustment, we would probably hit zero. Is what appears.
We would be about
definitely.
negative 35 million.
Yeah. Okay. And for those who aren't familiar with the implementation adjustment.
Yes, I can explain what that is. So what we do, and we varied it this year because we learned from the last CIP, which was the first time we introduced it. Last CIP, we introduced a 20% implementation adjustment on all funds. And what that acknowledges is the fact that even though we have conservatively tried to give our best estimate of schedule and also cost, projects lag, we need events, we're waiting on approvals, projects don't meet the schedule, no matter how good we try to get our estimates. And so that inherently lets funding sit in the balances and accumulate. And so what we've done with the implementation adjustment is to sort of buy us that time to assume that we're going to be late on projects in order to allow us to populate more projects in the CIP with the assumption that we won't hit that negative 35 million because of natural project lags. We varied it this time by funding sources just because of the types of projects in there. MVTA local, which covers a lot of operations costs or program costs, whether it's signals, safety improvements, also some staff, that's fairly consistent. We left the 20%. But for CNI, which covers a lot of our major projects, we inflated the implementation adjustment earlier in the CIP and then we tapered it towards the end of the CIP, just based on the trends that we saw from last time.
Who else has questions still on the CIP that we weren't able to get to? Anybody? Mr. Furman.
I'll just share because I had a question about it and I looked it up at your suggestion. The next TSP corridor is Columbia Pike, which
Thank you.
that's what I was hoping it was. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. I will just thank you. This is so useful. The issue every time the CIP comes around is that it is simultaneously way too big to understand and insufficiently detailed to understand at the same time, which is like so frustrating, right? There's so much information here, but not the information that I want. So this has been super great. Thank you. I don't think we need to go to the point of making this. Oh, Commissioner Hussain, did you have your hand up? No, okay. Oh, Commissioner Lantelmi does. All right. Well, Commissioner Lantelmi.
I have just one question. What does PROAG stand for?
Darn it. I wish, actually, I do have the presentation up. I can look public right of way. Oh, go ahead, Brett.
No, please.
Oh, because I'm not going to remember. I was going to have to look it up as I was saying it.
Public right to way accessibility guidelines.
Thank you.
Public rights of way accessibility. Thank you. Because I'm going to need to explain it to other people. So I need to know what it means. Thank you.
It is the finally updated ADA requirement.
And it's a really good thing. It just adds a lot more to all of our projects.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. New requirements that are good and useful, but everybody's trying to figure them out, and there's a lot more to do that we didn't have to do in the past. I want to speak up on a couple things, I guess, just from a prioritization standpoint, right? Because once stuff ends up in the CIP, it has a little bit of momentum. I, for one, would love to see courthouse multimodal make its way into the CIP somehow, sometime soon. The trouble is always, right, was what are you recommending that be pulled, right? Because we're out of money. I do want to say, in response to the question, there is a project in the out years that is reconstructing 20th Street in Crystal City, and I don't see that as a priority, personally. I think we're seeing it is not a particularly important corridor, in my opinion, for any particular mode. It almost functions like an alley. I would much prefer to see that money put someplace like Courthouse Multimodal or put someplace like 15th Street in Pentagon City, which the Pentagon City sector plan called out as needing, to complete that protected bike lane connection along 15th Street between Hayes and Elm. And I don't see redevelopment getting us much on 15th Street between Hayes and Elm, given Pentagon Center's insane in the future redevelopment potential and the other buildings being relatively new along that corridor. I also would love for the county to explore reconnecting communities money for the Arlington View connector. It feels tailor-made for that project. 395 cut our community in half, and the Arlington View connector is attempting to put that back together. But I know the Arlington View connector has a tight timeline, and I don't know what that funding timeline looks like. But that would be another suggestion. And I know, I'm sure staff is working on it, but we need to be thinking real hard about how we can package some of these great projects that we have in the CIP together for NVTA regional money, because NVTA owes us a lot of money.
If I may, I'm going to say yes and no. We have learned in the past, specifically with MVTA, but with other funding agencies, packaging turns out to be an administrative nightmare in terms of the accounting and also when projects don't go at the same time. But we do anticipate submitting a very robust list of projects to MVTA during their next 6-year program.
Glad to hear it. Anything else on the CIP, folks? All right. Well, then thank you everyone who has stayed up. Not nearly as late as we used to for TC, but late for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the last agenda item, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
All right. Well, then I'm going to take this opportunity to talk for a minute, since I didn't at the very beginning, and thank everyone on this dais, everyone who is on Transportation Commission, the absolutely fantastic Ms. Obukoya, who has helped me through many years of meetings and agendas and whatnot. I looked it up. Let's see, I think I've got it here. I was appointed to Transportation Commission on September 20th, 2011, nearly 13 years ago. And it has been an absolute blast to be chair. It has been fantastic to see projects get built and site plans get built, and to be able to ride a trail and be like, this trail's better because of what I did. I'm thankful for everybody who is on the commission. It has sometimes been hard to find folks who are willing to give this kind of time. And I appreciate every single one of you who is willing to show up here on a Thursday night and get into the weeds on transportation stuff and try and make Arlington better. And so you're not completely rid of me. By my understanding, my chairmanship ends in,
I looked it up today,
3 days, but my appointment doesn't end until September 30th. So I have one more meeting where I can sit in the back and shoot spitballs at Commissioner Maradovic as chair. And then it will be on to who knows what. But thank you all for everything that you have done. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you around and watching you on YouTube. Do continue this fantastic work without me. So thank you all. We are adjourned.
Our next meeting is August 29th, the last one for you.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for all that you've done, and I'm sad to see you go, or to see you move on. Thank you, Commissioner Locker.
Yeah, it's going to be very weird to have the Transportation Commission without Commissioner Flat there. He's been on it the entire time I've been on it. We will definitely miss your probing questions and deep knowledge. So thank you so much for your leadership.
Yes, thank you so much for your leadership. And everything that Commissioner Lantomi said was true. The probing questions and just your wealth of knowledge about everything Arlington and everything transportation. You will definitely be missed.
Thanks so much.
And you've been a great resource for me to rely on in this transition from Richard Best to me. So I am deeply appreciative and a little sad to see you go. Thank you so much.